Chapter 1000. Jin Gang Ji was originally from Mariah. Even though Bai Shaoxing said that he was Lotus Peanut's disciple, the truth was that Lotus Peanut might not dare to call himself his master. Other than learning the time scripture from Tubo and Lotus Peanut, Jin Gang Ji had another master in India. He once studied under Silent Wisdom Master at Nalanda Temple, and then studied under Master Shengxian, theory of yoga, theory of knowledge, and theory of debate. His most outstanding master was Dragon Tree Bodhisattva's disciple, Master Longji. He learned the Vajra Apex Yoga Sutra and Vairocana Dharma. As the founder of Mahayana Buddhism and the disciple of Dragon Tree Bodhisattva, his status was much higher than Lianhua's disciple. At this time, Mahayana Buddhism had yet to spread to the east. Even Bai Shaoxing might not know about the Dragon Tree Bodhisattva in India. On the other hand, Lianhua was well known in the Central Plains because Tubo was close to the Tang Empire. Jin Gang Ji Tong's senior brother, Shan Wu Wei, had come to the eastern lands with a mission. Other than promoting the Vajrayana of Buddhism, he also had the important task of finding the 4 Sakyamuni celestial artifacts that were taken away by the traders of the Brahmin sect that were defeated by Gautama Buddha. Legend has it that Sakyamuni comprehended the supreme Dharma from the Dipankara Buddha's relic, the world-illuminating lamp, and a Buddha's palm that could subdue the heretics. With his infinite wisdom, Shakyamuni brought forth a new form of the Buddha's palm and evolved it into 5 forms of the Buddha's palm. Before he passed away in meditation, he saw through the future Maitreya Buddha's birth. The 8 forms of the Buddha's palm would evolve into the 9th form of the Buddha's palm. 5 powerful instruments were passed down. So far, there were 6 instruments in India that contained the secret of the Buddha's palm. 4 of them were stolen by the Brahmin traders who were defeated by Sakyamuni. They were brought to the eastern lands in a futile attempt to assist Cao Cao in seizing control of the world during the chaos of the 3 kingdoms, thus reviving the Brahmin tradition. In the end, such a vain attempt was defeated by the local Taoist masters of the eastern land, as well as the Indian Buddhists, Kumarash and Bodhidharma, who had come to hunt down the remnants of the Brahmin sect. After the successor of the Brahmin, Mahajaluo, failed, the 4 magical weapons that he stole disappeared without a trace. The few Indian monks had no choice but to stay in the eastern lands and pass down the orthodoxy of Buddhism. Only then did the Wei and Jin dynasties have 480 temples in the southern dynasties. Xuanzang didn't know that this tanned, skinny, and bumpkin-looking Indian Hindustani had such an amazing background. If he knew, he, a self-proclaimed Mahayana disciple who hadn't shaved his head, wouldn't know where his knees would go soft. Of course, even if Xuanzang knew, he might not think highly of this Indian monk. After all, according to the Monkey King, he was the reincarnation of Gautama Buddha's disciple. Moreover, he had the suspicious Buddhist monk, nameless Zen master, who had carefully taught him. He was the direct disciple of Gautama Buddha in both lives and was destined to be the Buddha of sandalwood merit in the future. His status was much higher than a mere disciple of the Dragon Tree. On the arena, 2 monks who didn't know each other's prominent status in the system looked at each other. It was Xuanzang who nodded first and put his palms together. Mahayana disciple Chun Xuanzang greets senior brother Jin Gang Ji. Jin Gang Ji, however, waved his hand and said stiffly with an Indian accent, "On the arena, fists and legs have no eyes." How could it matter if they were senior brothers or not? I wonder why you call me a Mahayana disciple? As far as I know, after the Dragon Tree Patriarch established Mahayana with a middle view, no Indian Buddhists came to the eastern lands to spread their teachings. How can there be a Mahayana? At this moment, Xuanzang was embarrassed. It turned out that Jin Gang Ji didn't recognize him as a Mahayana disciple. The exorcists below were all shrewd people. How could they not understand the meaning behind Jin Gang Ji's words? They whispered to each other, obviously waiting to see Xuanzang make a fool of himself. Fortunately, the eastern lands were second to none. These exorcists weren't Buddhist disciples like Xuanzang who would automatically lower their heads in front of Indian Buddhists. They looked down on these Indian natives. Therefore, although they wanted to see Xuanzang make a fool of himself, they didn't feel any better when they looked at Jin Gang Ji, the ignorant barbarian. What they were thinking was Xuanzang's embarrassment when he met Li Kuei was naturally worthy of ridicule. But you, a barbarian from the West, actually dared to look down on our magnificent Middle-earth. You're even more ignorant. Everything in our Middle-earth is the best. Even if it's the Eastern lands, when it comes to our Middle-earth, the outstanding people will definitely surpass your Indian. Do you think there's no one in our Middle-earth who can stand up to you? Shan Wuwei saw the surrounding exorcist's malicious, disdainful, or blatant discrimination. He sighed slightly, but it was too late to stop his junior brother. Xuanzang looked awkward, but there was nothing he could say to refute. Zhu Ganglai, on the other hand, sneered and scolded. What can a mere Hindustani from India know? Our Middle-earth dynasty has its own national conditions. We don't respect any foreign ancestors or deities. Since you came to our land, you better stay obediently. All deities that the people of Middle-earth believe in must not be foreigners. Is the Western Daqin Vatican overbearing? When preaching to Middle-earth, the believers still have to listen to the imperial court. What is the imperial court? It's the manifestation of Hao Yan's will. Therefore, the emperor is the son of heaven. The son of heaven is the son of Hao Yan, and Hao Yan is the Tao of Middle-earth. If you, the Mahayana, still insist on the Hindustani way, I'm sorry, Middle-earth won't allow such a powerful existence like you. If you still insist on the Indian way, Zhu Gonglia's domineering aura from his previous life was fully displayed. He said majestically, then from now on, our Buddha is our Buddha, and your Buddha is your Buddha. Every dog has its day. When the time comes, it's still uncertain whether India will still be a Buddhist land. The Orthodox Buddhism is in Middle-earth. No one is allowed to interfere. Xuanzang was not as domineering as Zhu Ganglai. He did not have a celestial lord to back him up. He could only answer awkwardly but politely, Senior brother, the Mahayana is not a secret Indian teaching. According to legend, when Buddha preached, although he did not say a word about the Mahayana Dharma, it was actually to avoid interfering with the disciples' cultivation of Dharma. In fact, he had already secretly told the disciples, and his Bodhi heart was awakened. Senior brother, how can you say that there is no Mahayana outside of India? This time, it was Jin Gang Ji's turn to choke. He had also heard that Mahayana was a secret teaching of Buddha that Xuanzang said, but that was a rumor made by his ancestor, Long Shu, to show that he was the orthodox Buddhism, to attack those Theravada who insisted on the primitive teachings of Buddhism, and to belittle their cultivation as Han. As a direct disciple of the Mahayana, how could he not know that this was completely a lie for political reasons? But now he could not expose it. After all, Jin Gang Ji was not as smooth as his senior brother, Shan Wuwei. If Shan Wuwei was here again, he would probably bite the bullet and admit it. However, Jin Gang Ji was proud of his identity as a direct disciple of the Mahayana. Although he later entered the Vajramayana with Lianhua, he was still proud of his sect. How could he tolerate Xuanzang, who in his eyes wore Kasaya and mixed into the Mahayana Buddhism? He bit the bullet and said, I am a direct disciple of the Mahayana. Do you think I don't know if there is an inheritance of the Mahayana robe in East Earth? In East Earth, other than me, it is impossible for there to be a disciple of the Mahayana Dharma. Jin Gangji had just said firmly when he heard his senior brother scolding him, Jin Gangji, don't talk nonsense. Jin Gangji retorted, Senior brother. Shan Wuwei's eyes widened as he looked at Jin Gangji and said slowly, Junior brother, have you forgotten why we came East Earth? Jin Gangji shouted angrily, Isn't it because of Ma Kai, the remnant of Brahmin? As soon as he said this, by Xiao Sheng, Master Xianglong, and the others' expressions changed. They didn't expect this Indian monk to come for one of Middle-earth's top experts, Ma Kai, the sect master of Pure Bliss sect. Master Xianglong couldn't help but say, Ma Kai is also a disciple of Buddhism with profound Dharma. Although his teachings are a little extreme, how can he be a remnant of Brahmin? Jin Gangji sneered. He is just a devil who snuck into Buddhism. Master Xianglong knew that Jin Gangji was right, but he couldn't agree to it. Now that Nambe Chao of Buddhism had suffered a great counterattack from Eastern Earth's Taoism and traditional forces, It was time for him to fight for allies. Not to mention Mokai's top martial arts, Pure Bliss sect was also very influential. Now that Buddhism was in need of manpower, how could he push them to the opposite side? He scolded in his heart. This Indian monk's brain is really not good. He doesn't even know that the key of Buddhism is to make more friends and fewer enemies. Our Central Earth's Buddhism is eclectic and eclectic. Hinduism is Hinduism. There is no cure for it. Amitabha, forgive me, I have slandered Buddha again. Patriarch Sakya must not be from Hinduism. Buddha is so wise. How could he be Hinduism? Master Xianlong shook his head, obviously disagreeing with Jin Gangji's words. Shan Wuwei saw Jin Gangji's unwise eyes and had no choice but to say, "Junior brother, don't forget our other mission." Jin Gangji's expression changed. Do you know why Jin Gangji was so loyal to Shan Wuwei? It was because Shan Wuwei's background was even more extraordinary. Jin Gangji was of the Brahmin caste and was the direct descendant of the dragon tree. Shan Wuwei, on the other hand, was a monk of the king and was the descendant of Gautama Buddha's father, the sweet rice king. In terms of caste, birth, bloodline, and status in the Buddhism system, Jin Gangji was completely defeated. How could he not respect this senior brother? By now, Jin Gangji had already understood what Shan Wuwei meant. There might really be a Mahayana lineage in the eastern lands, and it was the core of their Vajra Mahayana Tantrism. It was the Vajra and Womb sects, the proof of the identity of Buddha's direct disciple, the place of the Tao, and the supreme scripture, Vairocana Sutra. It was also their most important mission in the East Earth, to find the supreme scripture of the Tantra, Mahavajrayana Sutra. Xuanzang, who was carrying the supreme scripture in front of his chest, said confusedly, "Thank you, senior martial brother. I am indeed a disciple of the Mahayana realm, although my master did not tell me about the orthodoxy that I inherited. Both of you are dead, but my heart and the Dharma I have learned are indeed the profound meaning of Mahayana." Jin Gangji's face turned green. He looked at Xuanzang and said coldly, "Then let me have a taste of Venerable Xuanzang's Mahayana Dharma." The Vajra wisdom finger came together, the tips of the fingers came together, the palms of the two hands separated, bulging together. His mouth chanted the mantra, "Sua Sua Paluo Ta Saluo De Imo Sa Paluo Dujan." After repeating the mantra 3 times, he slightly closed his middle finger. It was Jingsang's mantra, Lotus Flower Palm Seal. On the Saber Mountain Arena, with Jin Gangji as the center, an indescribable force spread out. The dust in the sky was pushed away by this invisible force. Under the moonlight, the dust reflected the light, like a budding lianhua, plated with a slightly bright and flawless layer. As Jin Gangji's hand seals changed, the white lotus bloomed. Layer after layer of lianhua bloomed. The entire Saber Mountain Arena and the surrounding area were covered by that white lotus. His mind was a Buddha. His mouth was chanting mantras. His hands were forming seals, and his body was a pure land. Within the blessed lands of the White Lotus, all demonic demons had nowhere to hide. Zhu Ganglai let out a roar and transformed, revealing his true form. He was a golden boar. Within the blessed lands of the White Lotus, although the demonic chi was surging like a tidal wave, it was not suppressed by the blessed lands as Vajraji had expected. A human-like cold smile appeared on Zhu Gonglia's golden pig face. He said, "Do you still think that this old pig is that filthy demon? Let me tell you, my true form is actually Canopy Marshall." Chapter 1001. Pale golden blood splattered on the Saber Mountain. The sound of dripping wind sounded like the wailing of ghosts and gods, but Jin Gangji's hands did not move at all. However, the lotus flower palm mudra in his hands changed. 2 thumbs and 2 little fingers connected, and the 6 fingers in the middle bent in sequence, like a budding lotus flower that was about to bloom. On top of the Saber Mountain, Sanskrit voices echoed. Samadhi Namanapala, also, Say Ma. The Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva chanted the Samadhi mantra, and formed the 8-leaf Madra. This was the Samadhi Madra of the Lotus Flower Division. The Lianhua that enveloped the entire Saber Mountain arena slowly rotated, and a pale white light gathered on Jin Gangji's body, plating him with a faint golden glow. Jin Gangji's body was pale gold. The dirt, dark skin, and weathered face gradually faded away, leaving behind a flawless body of Jin Gang. As Jin Gang lowered his head, he slowly raised his head. As the Lianhua Pure Land bloomed again, a body of Jin Gang stood between the 9 petals. The golden body of Jin Gangji was almost as tall as the nearby mountains. He stepped on the golden lotus, and the various saber mountains and hell around him seemed to be holding up his Lianhua. Facing this body of Jin Gangji, Zhu Gonglia's figure seemed exceptionally small. Jin Gang slowly retracted his hands. His left hand was placed by his waist, and his right hand was erected in front of his chest. Then he slowly pushed towards Zhu Ganglai and Xuanzang. As the golden palm pushed forward, the countless towering reefs and mountains all fell towards Zhu Ganglai. With the momentum of a landslide, thousands of blades formed a sea. Zhu Ganglai saw that as Jin Gangji pushed his palm, the surrounding sharp mountains all fell towards him. Countless blades gathered, collided, and spun towards him like a tidal wave. Zhu Ganglai showed no fear. He only shook the rake in his hand and protected Xuanzang behind him. The rake that was originally only as tall as a human was pushed out, and then it grew with the wind. It grabbed a mountain behind Zhu Ganglai and flung it towards Jin Gangji's glaring body of Jin Gangji. The huge hill smashed over, shattering any blade that blocked its path. The sharp reefs shattered upon contact, and the mountain top that was smashed over was continuously peeled off by the sea of blades. When it reached King Kongji, it was only half the size of King Kong. King Kong waved his left palm and split it in half from the middle. The remnant peak smashed into the 5-finger mountain behind it, causing the mountain to tremble. The exorcists at the foot of the mountain had all sorts of expressions on their faces as they watched this scene. They had not expected such a huge commotion when it had only just begun. Was this still a martial arts competition? It was clearly moving mountains and draining seas, causing mountains to collapse and the earth to crack. He had thought that it was already amazing for the 2 judges to create 2 astonishing arenas. Unexpectedly, this Saber Mountain arena was still not enough for people to fight. Just as the 5 Fingers mountain shook, an angry roar came from the mountain. What the hell? Do you still want me to sleep? If you want to fight, fight outside. Don't fight in front of my door. Among the lotus flowers on the mountain, a rusty black iron rod with 2 golden hoops on the middle extended out. The rod rapidly elongated and tapped on the chest of the golden body of wisdom. The golden body seemed to be heavily injured as dense cracks appeared on it. It flew backward, flying a distance of a few mountains before falling on a mountain. You still have to work tomorrow. Do you have any sense of civility? In the lotus pond of the 5 Fingers Mountain, a muffled voice said, "Is this what Tathagata taught you? You have no manners." The faces of all the exorcists turned ugly. Bai Shaoxing exclaimed, This is the Monkey King?" Jin Gangji fell on the rocky peak and struggled to stand up. With a roar, he put his palms together, his fingers facing each other. His index finger and little finger were facing each other, while his middle finger and ring finger were crossed and pressed down. The 2 fingers were facing each other, and the fingertips were connected. This was the Earth Madra. Countless Sanskrit chants surrounded the golden body and sang, "The days are long, the days are long, the days are long, the days are long, the days are full, the load is full, the load is full, the load is full of Ja." On the Sword Mountain arena, the main peak suddenly glowed with golden light and slowly stood up. Jin Gangji slowly raised the Earth Madra, and the main peak also slowly rose until it was a few hundred meters above the sky. Countless rocks flashed with golden light and peeled off. The rocks on the main peak continued to peel off and slowly formed the shape of a Jin Gang. The Earth Madra was also known as the Jin Gang by Madra. Jin Gangji roared, and the chanting around him became louder. The Jin Gang by Madra in his hand pressed down on the ground. The huge Jin Gang by that was erected high also smashed down, the tip of the bai towards Zhu Gangue. On the bai's handle, there was a wisdom king's head that was glaring angrily. The angry aspect, God's Vajra by God's powerful Buddha nature, could remove all obstacles. The triangular by God originally symbolized breaking through all obstacles. In the Sanskrit words of Jin Gang Bai, there was the meaning of big nail and down nail. Jin Gang Ji, who was not far away, had a Jin Gang Ji in his hand. He smashed it towards the tail of the Jin Gang Bai, and an invisible force brazenly drilled towards Zhu Gangue. The faint demonic aura in his body was quickly dispelled, and all external techniques could not be used on him. It seemed that only his physical body could face the Jin Gang Bai that was drilling into his heart. The glaring Jin Gang wielded the Jin Gang Bai to stab the demons of all directions, and there was no obstacle that could not be broken. Jin Gang Ji was to use the wisdom of Jin Gang to break through all obstacles, and use the flawless dharma of Jin Gang to break through all external paths. Jin Gang meant that it was flawless, indestructible, the hardest, and the most perfect. Zhu Gangue, who had the appearance of a golden pig, had a fat head and big ears, and looked charmingly naive. He roared towards the sky, "Dizun, help me!" Then he stared at the sky above his head, with a hint of flattery. He was full of naivety and exceptionally cute. On one side, Jin Gang was glaring, but on the other side, he was acting cute. Zhu Gangue's shameless shaking of his head and wagging of his tail finally caused the stars in the sky to light up one by one. Among them, the North Star hung high in the sky, and all the stars were intimidated. Then, the North Star and the 9 imperial stars lit up one by one. The Big Dipper was like a ladle, and the Bright Cave Palace's external assistant Star Lord, Hidden Light Palace's inner Star Lord, Tianren, Tianheng, Tianfu, Tianing, Tianyi, Tianju, Tianxin, Tianxiao, and all the way up to Tianpeng Qinxing. The 9 stars shot at the rake in Zhu Gangue's hand, and the 9 teeth of the rake corresponded to the 9 imperial stars. Zhu Gangue summoned his courage and swept the rake horizontally, and the huge Jin Gang Bai collapsed upon contact. The Jin Gang Ji was caught off guard and was smashed on his body. The 9 teeth broke out of his body, and his golden body was instantly shattered. On the ruins of the Mountain of Knives, the Jin Gang Ji's true body suddenly spat out a mouthful of dark golden blood, and he fell to the ground, paralyzed. Zhu Gangue laughed and said, "You have divine techniques, and I have a backer. Your divine techniques are only SOSO, and my backer is incomparably powerful. Ha ha ha. How can you possibly defeat me?" The Jin Gang Ji said in disbelief, "Why? The glaring Jin Gang Bai only has the appearance, but it collapsed upon contact. Why doesn't Buddha help me?" The Jin Gang Ji was in disbelief. That Buddhist divine art, other than his own magic power, also had the support of various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. However, the Jin Gang Bai collapsed upon contact just now, and all the support was just the appearance. Only his magic power was defeated by Tian Peng's Beichen Jochin support, and he couldn't resist at all. Otherwise, even if he couldn't win, he wouldn't have lost so miserably. Tian Peng said proudly, "It's because your backer isn't strong enough. You think you're fighting me alone, but you're actually fighting both me and Master. Of course you'll lose." At this moment, Zhu Gangue no longer looked down on Xianzong, and instead called him Master. The Jin Gang Ji still didn't want to believe. He clearly has no magic power at all, and he just stood there without moving. Zhu Gangue laughed and said, "What a joke. Some people don't need to make a move. They only need to show their attitude. You think my master is useless? Yes, in most situations, he's really useless. But my master can suppress fate. He'll be successful in every endeavor." Zhu Gangue took Buddha's face into consideration, so he said it in a roundabout way. Actually, it was Jin Gang Ji's backer, the Dragon Tree Bodhisattva, who couldn't win against Buddha. Using the Jin Gang Bai that was supported by Buddha to smash the second direct disciple supported by Buddha, it would be strange if it had any effect. A battle filled with shady dealings and behind-the-scenes manipulations ended with the complete defeat of the Jin Gang Ji. When the Jin Gang Ji was carried off, he still couldn't believe that he had lost just like that. His Zen heart suffered a huge blow, and he couldn't recover from this setback. Chapter 1002. Xuanzang sat upright among the broken mountains of knives, while Zhu Ganglai stood with his rake. Regardless of whether they knew what was going on or not, the exorcist did not want to provoke this extremely weak demon trainer who could destroy cities and slaughter armies with his two disciples for the time being. Looking at the exorcists whispering to each other, Xuanzang suddenly asked Zhu Ganglai, "Wu Neng, do you think they will listen to me now?" Zhu Ganglai knew what Xuanzang was going to say when he stuck out his butt, so he advised, "Think twice. Master, you can't mess with that monkey. Just let him play. Don't get yourself into trouble." Xuanzang sighed. "The Monkey King is naughty and mischievous. Should I just sit back and watch? Besides, I can't tolerate him using Miss Duan's matter." He immediately stood up and said to the Monkey King's arena, "Monkey King, you changed your name to Traveling Monk's Son and mingled with the exorcists who wanted to get rid of you. What are you plotting?" The exorcist below exploded. Even Bai Shaosheng couldn't help but stand up. He said to the people around him, "Help me up. I want to take a good look." Master Xianglong couldn't help but shout, "Venerable Xuanzang, you said that Traveling Monk's Son is the Monkey King. Do you have any proof?" Xuanzang looked at the Monkey King and said, "That day, Mr. Emptiness and Miss Duan found the Five-Finger Mountain through me after learning the Tiger Form Fist and Heaven Crippling Legs. At that time, you killed Heaven Crippling Legs, and I asked you for advice on how to reform the Pig Demon. In the end, Miss Duan died trying to subdue the Pig Demon. Today, I'm not here to take revenge on you, because I'm not worthy. But I just want to ask you if you still have humanity in your heart." The Monkey King sat with his back facing Xuanzang and said vaguely, "I'm not a human. How can I have humanity?" Hearing him admit it, the exorcism convention exploded. Blind screamed, He is the Monkey King." Master Xianglong couldn't help but take 2 steps towards the arena where the Monkey King was. He leaned on his Buddhist staff and looked over. Master Jingming's hand was on the 7-star sword. Jin Gang Ji's eyes were wide open, and Shan Wuwei suddenly raised his head. At some point in time, Kong Hai had arrived at Vajra Wisdom's seat and bowed to him in the manner of a disciple. At this moment, he also stood up in shock. Hassan laughed sinisterly and said, "A hero of the Eastern lands. I can't believe you didn't even realize that your target was right in front of you." Hee. All the exorcists from the otherworld and the Eastern lands could not help but cast sidelong glances at him. "Monkey King, you are a human, or rather, all demons are humans. How is it inhumane? I, Chan Xuanzang, have always adhered to the concept of exorcism, and that is to deliver all living beings from suffering. Demons are not the source of all the sufferings of time. Only the 3 poisonous hearts of greed, obsession, and anger are the true demons. I am willing to subdue the true devil, to deliver all living beings from suffering." Monkey King replied calmly, "You can't even save yourself? You still want to deliver all living things from suffering? To deliver others is to deliver oneself. Delivering all living things from suffering isn't something that can only be done after one becomes enlightened and becomes a Buddha. It's something that everyone can do. Deliver oneself and deliver others. In the past, I was ignorant, childish, and self-righteous. You taught me to face myself and others. Now, I'm going to teach you to let go of your evil thoughts and think of the common people." Xuanzang put his palms together. Monkey King smiled and said, "Chan Xuanzang, you are still ignorant, childish, and self-righteous. Summer insects cannot talk about ice. You're just a puppet that is manipulated by others. Can you not talk to me about freedom and enlightenment? I asked you, and you said you were enlightened. If you were to face me again, would you still be able to make a choice? Don't try to reason with this devil." Blind shouted, "Everyone, let's fight together." With that, he took out a slingshot and clipped a golden bead to it. He aimed left and right, and the surrounding exorcists dodged. Someone scolded, "You damned blind man, of all things, You chose a slingshot. You actually used a slingshot to get rid of devils. Blind suddenly revealed a smile that seemed to transcend the mortal world and said, "Use your ears to hear, and use your heart to shoot. The golden bullet exterminates the devil's body, and the heart's eye penetrates the devil's soul." With that, he pulled the slingshot in the opposite direction of Monkey King. Everyone was speechless and dispersed. However, after Blind shot the golden bullet, it actually shot forward at an astonishing speed. Its speed had completely surpassed the eyesight of Master Xianglong and Bai Shaosheng. In the orbit of the planet, it made use of the planet's gravity and rotation to accelerate continuously. In the end, it made one round around Earth and shot back to the center of Monkey King's back. At this moment, the speed of the golden bullet had already reached Mach 50. At such a high speed, the golden bullet had already transcended the state of matter and turned into a strange, condensed state of matter. Despite facing such a terrifying weapon, Monkey King didn't even look at it. He just grabbed the marble when it got close to him. A furry claw slowly stretched out, and in his fist there was still that golden bead. Monkey King said slowly, "A slingshot that looks like a crescent moon on my waist and a three-pointed, double-edged spear in my hand. The style of this slingshot is really familiar. Are you from Guan River Estuary?" Blind saw that his attack was futile, but his expression didn't change. Instead, he grabbed the slingshot and cupped his fists. "I'm nameless, a grass god. I'm not worthy of the great sage's name." The weirdos that were mixed among the exorcists, those with broken arms, legs, deafness, and dementia, all took out their weapons and shouted in unison. "The 800 grass gods of Guan River Estuary have received orders to protect Buddha's seal on the Five Fingers Mountain. Monkey King, without Buddha's order, don't even think of escaping." Monkey King sighed faintly. "Why would I, old son, need to escape? King of the demons." Monkey King. Master Xianglong took off his kasaya and picked up his monk's staff. "Today, Monkey King has escaped. It's a cause for celebration. It's a pity that it's a calamity for the common people and a great calamity for the righteous path. I can only use my broken body to suppress the great sage here again." Master Jingming also said, "That's good too. Let's test the quality of your demon king." The other exorcists were speechless until Bai Shaosheng stood out and said, "I'm already a cripple, so why should I care about my old body?" The group of exorcists pulled out their swords and knives without fear. Someone laughed. "I've killed many demons. Why would I be afraid of an old antique from 500 years ago? Everyone, follow me." The strong man standing at the front suddenly raised his glaive above his head. "Kill this demon. Kill." Shouts came from the exorcists, and all of them charged at Monkey King. Blind picked up 4 golden marbles with one hand and plucked the string on his new moon slingshot. The 4 marbles shot toward Monkey King with astonishing speed and power. Master Xianglong flew up and charged at Monkey King with Master Jingming. A monk's staff surged like a flood dragon with the power to shatter mountains. The other 7 stars' treasured sword stabbed into the sky. In the distant horizon, a smear of white leaped out. Thunder roared in the sky, and countless bolts of lightning descended from the stars, gathering at the tip of the 7 stars' treasured sword. The Big Dipper in the sky reflected the 7 stars' treasured sword. Xuanzang turned around and was shocked to see Zhu Ganglai secretly retracting his hand. Zhu Ganglai smiled awkwardly. "I old pig, I'm just saying hello. If that monkey hits me, Master, you have to help me." Xuanzang looked at the exorcists and sighed. "How can I help you? I can't do anything." He looked at his hands and said sadly. Zhu Ganglai said, "Master, you are the only one who can subdue Monkey King. You are just lacking something. When you understand it, you will naturally have the boundless power to subdue the heart monkey." Monkey King punched out, and the entire sky was torn apart. Master Jingming's sword, which was strengthened by the Big Dipper and the Lightning Sect, was instantly shattered. The boundless power of lightning swept back, and before Master Jingming could make a sound, he disappeared within the lightning. Monkey King stretched out his hand and grabbed Master Xianglong's monk's staff. Master Xianglong struggled to hold on, but Goku easily lifted his Buddhist staff. Master Xianglong suddenly shouted, Shinsu Huaning, leave quickly. Take the legacy of our Shaolin Zen sect and go as far as you can. After saying that, he roared, and the muscles all over his body almost exploded. The full power of the Golden Bell shield, which was as tough as steel, suddenly burst out, pressing the monk's staff inch by inch. Monkey King said lightly, Not bad. I only used 1/10,000th of my strength, but you can actually block it. Then I'll be more serious. Then, with a slight force, Master Xianglong spat out blood mixed with his internal organs. His monk's staff was forcefully twisted, and his iron-like tendons and bones suddenly collapsed. Flesh and blood burst out from all over his body. Ah! Master Xianglong roared, and together with his monk's staff, he was smashed into the stone by Monkey King and turned into minced meat. For marbles shot toward Monkey King's eyes, but as his golden beast-like pupils opened, the marbles turned into ashes under the golden light emitted by Monkey King's eyes. Monkey King opened his mouth and roared, turning all the exorcists who were charging toward him into ashes. The 800 grass gods could not hold on for a long time and turned into ashes together. Monkey King stood on the arena that was covered with ashes, and his merciless eyes swept across all the people who were still alive. The remaining people who were still alive froze. Bai Shaoxing trembled and almost couldn't make a sound as he roared, Demon King. Exorcists. This is the real devil's tribulation. If we fail, blood will flow like a river. At the end of the Sui dynasty, all the demons will come out, and the tragic scene of cannibalism will appear again. Bai Shaoxing roared, Don't cherish this body. Meet the tribulation with death. The rest of the exorcists resisted in despair, but were overturned by Monkey King with one palm. Everyone was crushed to death in front of an unknown ancient temple, where the blood of the Tang dynasty's exorcists was buried. Xuanzang knelt on the arena and said in despair, Stop it. Don't kill. Shan Wei could not bear it anymore. He stood up, and a huge Ksitigarbha materialized behind him. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had just opened his eyes when he saw the golden cudgel sweeping across the sky. His Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva shattered, and his Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva disappeared. Shan Wuwei's tendons and bones were crushed, and he fell beside his junior brother Jin Gangji. Under the Monkey King's demonic power, Zhu Ganglai and Sha Wujing wisely stopped resisting and watched from the side. The group of samsara travelers who had been fighting for a long time were trembling, and they murmured, Damn God, he's tricked me again. This is the damn Monkey King. Is Buddha as strong as him? He's so strong, it's almost impossible to resist. Zhuang Baifan said in despair. How did Jinren Jiogong bully such a strong Monkey King? Chapter 1003. Xuanzang lowered his head speechlessly. Monkey King said, Everyone says you're lacking a little. Do you know what you're lacking? Monkey King pinched his index finger and thumb. Xuanzang could see the entire universe in the space between his fingers. Xuanzang sighed. Master, I still can't comprehend it. Monkey King went up to him and squatted down. You can't comprehend that little bit. You are only lacking the Vairocana Sutra. That way, you will regain the boundless mana you had in your previous life. Xuanzang raised his head in shock. Mana from my previous life? You said that the little bit I am lacking is actually the mana from my previous life? Even under such a serious situation, Xuanzang couldn't help but complain. I have been trying to comprehend it for so long, but you are telling me that I can't comprehend it at all. Are you King kidding me? What else? Monkey King went up to Xuanzang and said, If you can comprehend it so easily, why do you need to go to the sutra? Why do you need to decide? What do you think it is? Anyone can have an idea, but what really matters is the power to carry it out. Ideas without power are worthless. The reason why a Buddha is because he has boundless magic power. Without magic power, Tathagata Buddha is nothing. So, Monkey King said, Your master taught you many ideas. The reason you're lacking a little bit is because you need to recover the boundless power from your previous life to carry it out. Beat me and the other demons into submission. This is the only way to reform demons. This is what I want to teach you. Giving in without power is meaningless. So, which deity have you heard of that relied on being manipulated by others to subdue demons? In the end, didn't they fist out, indicating physics reform? Monkey King patted Xuanzang's shoulder and sighed. So, regardless of the twisted logic in the sutra, I will teach you a universal truth. The world is material. It doesn't exist in people's minds. So, the only way for consciousness to affect material is through practice. Practice requires power. Therefore, the idea of consciousness relying on power to change reality, relying on thinking in the mind, relying on enlightenment to change everything in reality, doesn't exist. So, Monkey King helped Xuanzang up, pointed at himself, and said, "Find the Vairocana Sutra, recover the limitless power from your past life, then beat me up. Do you understand?" The Monkey King shouted when he saw that Xuanzang was distracted. Xuanzang subconsciously stood straight and said, "Understood." Monkey King went over to chat with Zhu Ganglai and Sha Wujing. "Friends, come and have a smoke." As he spoke, Zhu Ganglai passed a stick of white sand to Monkey King. Zhu Ganglai skillfully borrowed a torch from the burning ruins of the battlefield. He put his arm around the Monkey King's shoulder and listened to him say, "I didn't mean to beat you up so badly in the past. Forgive me, forgive me." Zhu Ganglai puffed out a smoke ring and said with a flattering smile, "We're on different sides. I understand. Come down to the mortal world to protect him." Monkey King pointed at Xuanzang behind him. Zhu Ganglai sighed and said, "I made a mistake in the sky, and the organization gave me a chance." Sha Wujing said in a muffled voice, "That's too much. All I did was break a glass cup." Zhu Ganglai felt that it was time for him to show off to the organization. He put down the cigarette and said to Sha Wujing, "Old Sha, this is a problem of your awareness. As the private secretary of the leader, you were careless and made mistakes. Is it a problem of the mistake itself? It's a problem of principle, a problem of attitude. Both of us made mistakes, but my attitude is very good when reflecting on it. Unlike you, when you were in the womb, in order to reason with him, I made you recall an unbearable past. I'm sorry." Monkey King said bitterly. Zhu Ganglai said magnanimously, "That's nothing. It's fine. It's just a small matter of the past. If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it. That bitch still dared to put a hat on me. Later, I'll send a note to the King of Hell and ask him to send that pair of adulterers to hell to train for a few years. Then, they'll reincarnate as pigs and become human food. If I don't play with them for 3 lifetimes, I, old pig, am Marshal Tian Pong for nothing." Monkey King and Zhu Ganglai squatted there and looked at Xuanzang. Xuanzang was thinking hard about where he vaguely saw the lines of Vairocana Sutra. Monkey King pointed and said, "Do you think he can find it?" Zhu Ganglai shook his head and said, "It'll be a miracle if he can find it. I say, great sage, are you really waiting for him to find the sutra to deal with you?" Monkey King took out the cigarette, but from his mouth, and extinguished it on the ground. He said indifferently, "It's still uncertain who will deal with who. So what if he finds a sutra? I've given him so many cheats to reform your current life, and even cause the death of his woman. So what if he has the Vairocana Sutra? Am I afraid?" Zhu Ganglai smiled knowingly. The two of them quickly became closer through the stupid leader who scolded Zhu Ganglai. The only surviving Indian Hindustani, Vajraji, crawled towards Xuanzang, who was on the mountain of blades. Golden blood stained a path behind him. After much difficulty, Vajraji finally reached Xuanzang's back and grabbed his shoes. Xuanzang hurriedly got up and said, "What are you doing? Don't force yourself after being beaten like this. Just stay there and wait for help." Vajraji grabbed Xuanzang's shoe tightly and spat out blood. He said with difficulty, "Vairocana Sutra." Xuanzang sighed. Monkey King said, "I'm only a little bit away from finding the Vairocana Sutra to restore the boundless power of my previous life." At this point, he suddenly turned around and asked, "This eminent monk from India, did you bring this Mahavairokkana Sutra with you?" Vajraji had already caught his breath. He said, "Senior brother, and I came to Middle-earth for this. Vairokkana, supreme scripture. Vairokkana, sutra. It must be." Vajraji swallowed another mouthful of blood. Xuanzang hurriedly patted his chest and said, "Don't rush. Speak slowly. Where is it?" "It must be with you," Vajraji finally said. Xuanzang was shocked. "Impossible. I've never seen the Vairokkana Sutra." Vajraji's eyes widened. "Impossible because Middle-earth can't have a Mahayana disciple, unless it's from Vairokkana Sutra." Xuanzang shook his head. "I learned the Mahayana Dharma from my master. Do you think the Vairokkana Sutra is in my master's hands? He didn't pass anything to me." "No, he did pass something to me. It's a book of 300 nursery rhymes. He also told me that this book has boundless power." In the end, Xuanzang was also stunned. He took out the 300 nursery songs from his bosom. His slightly trembling hands held the 300 nursery songs that were messily pieced together. Under the first ray of light from the sun that leaped out from the east, the cover was impressively made up of 6 characters of different sizes. They formed the Ru Lai Zhan Sutra. Xuanzang's body froze. Vajraji looked at the sutra and trembled as if he would die at any moment. He said in a trembling voice, "Quick, practice." Xuanzang placed the Vairokkana Sutra in front of him. A breeze of unknown origin slowly flipped the pages for him. Countless sutras flashed before his eyes. Suddenly, Xuanzang seemed to have understood something. The Vajra wisdom slowly propped up his body, took out a dagger with trembling hands, and slashed at Xuanzang. Xuanzang didn't move and let the dagger fall on his hair. Vajraji said solemnly, "As a Mahayana disciple of the 5th generation, I will tonsure you. From now on, you will convert to Buddhism and become a Mahayana disciple." As the dagger moved, Xianzang's afro was shaved off bit by bit. Countless Sanskrit chants sounded around him, and the morning light from the rising sun seemed to gather on his body, making him shine with a golden radiance. Monkey King nibbled on a peach and watched quietly. Finally, Xuanzang sat down, his hands forming a Dhyana seal. His bald head shone. Zhu Ganga covered his eyes and shouted, "Ah, my eyes!" When the Vairokkana Sutra was flipped to the end, Xuanzang saw a small scribble on it. The handwriting was childish and cute. It was a clumsy little monk. Suddenly, a teardrop slid down silently. Chapter 1004. All was silent. The entire Great Gobi Desert's giant hand was deathly still, as if time had stopped at this moment. Then a tiny crack suddenly appeared on one of the most insignificant wrinkles in the giant hand. Then, in an instant, a divine monkey whose entire body was shimmering with golden light, holding a golden cudgel, smashed everything in the middle of the giant hand, stepping on auspicious clouds as it emerged. Wukong's fur fluttered in the wind. The dust on his body had been evaporated by the powerful magic power surging all over his body. His originally colorless fur became like golden threads, reflecting the light of the eastern sun. It was so dazzling that Xuanzang and the others could not open their eyes. Wukong was wearing a golden chain armor and a phoenix feather crown on his head. He was wearing a pair of cloud-walking shoes and holding a star-fixing god metal treasure. Goku's entire body was covered in armor, and he was no longer in dire straits like before. His attire made him look exceptionally mighty, and even his 6-foot height had increased by 30%, making him look more like a human. Apart from his hairy face and thunder mouth, he looked like a god. The reincarnators trembled when they saw the Monkey King return to his original appearance. Abno Simai groaned in pain. "This is at least a 10-star relic. It wasn't this powerful even when it faced the Sword of Gai in the Moon World. Are you kidding me? If this is the Monkey King's armor, then what was his costume in the plot?" F***CK. Zhuang Bifan cursed. "This monkey is too powerful. It's nothing like the information we received." Han sighed and said, "This combat power reminds me of the well-known mythological plot. The change in the plot of The Lord of the Rings triggered the hidden background of The Lord of the Rings, the Twilight of the Gods chapter of the Ring of Nibelungen. Many Vera and Maya descended to the mortal world and performed the scene of the Twilight of the Gods. I was just a six-star newbie back then. If it wasn't for the plot of the legend, the Northern European team, which was as powerful as all of us, and their leader, Odin, was a god-level powerhouse who broke through all four gates of the Gate of God, would not have been destroyed. Mark and I benefited from the Northern European team's insignificant influence. That's how we got to where we are today. You've actually experienced the rampaging Lord of the Rings plot. The magician exclaimed. Sauron brought about his own destruction in an attempt to obtain Morgoth's power. In the end, it caused Morgoth to return to Middle-earth in the plot of the One Ring. The Ring Protector team that was originally doing fine became the one who suppressed Sauron, seized control of the One Ring, magically modified the Beastmen, and triggered the Beastmen's industrialization. Because the plot of the first Lord of the Rings had undergone such a shocking change, it attracted the strongest rebirth teams of the realm to enter the plot. As a result, it triggered a chain reaction, and it actually linked to the mythical background of the creation of the Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Nibelungen. Vera and Maya were born. Morgoth caused the Twilight of the Gods. Morgoth, the earthly serpent and serpent of the Doomsday Dragon. The burly Viking Mark said indifferently. Who could forget such a thing? Hans trembled. It was because I survived the legend that I lost the courage to face the legend. I upgraded from paladin to a cultivator, which has the strongest survivability. I just want to escape from that nightmarish mythological plot. Before entering this world, I just heard that the Mummy world, the Bible, Egypt, and the Pre-Qin dynasty, the three main mythological systems of the Mummy world, have collided, setting off the great plot of the war between the two great undead empires of the East and the West. The Mummy world and the three undead empires. I didn't expect to encounter the legend of the westward journey in the westward journey. Hans roared. Goku looked at the giant earth palm that was flattened by his rod, waved his iron rod, and threatened. Although I am the father of heaven and mother of earth, unfortunately, heaven is not this world, and earth is not this earth. Even if there's a trace of incense, if you still want to go against me, old son, then don't blame me for not giving you face. He actually threatened the consciousness of the planet in this world. The consciousness of the planet trembled slightly and quickly woke up from the influence of the seal of exorcism. After all, the seal of exorcism was not personally used by Sakyamuni. It could not reach the level where it could purify the earth with a single thought. Therefore, after waking up, the consciousness of the planet quickly chose to follow its heart. You guys go fight. I won't get involved in your stupid business, Earth. Satisfied, Monkey King turned around and said to Xuanzang, Golden Cicada, show me your real ability. Don't make a fool of yourself in front of me with these insignificant tricks. Not to mention the seal of exorcism of Vairocana. Even the golden body of Buddha is here. That's all there is to it. You have the Vairocana Sutra. Among the many inheritances my master left me, there's one that he has just started an experimental project. It is called the Great Radiation Buddha Sutra. Although my master has only deduced the first move, the initial radiance, I specially spent some time to perfect it in order to play with you. Infinite light, infinite heat, infinite radiation. The Great Radiation Buddha's palm was different from the Buddha's palm. After all, Xuanzang's Buddha's palm was the real Buddha's palm. It could also be called the Buddha's palm. If he couldn't win, he would use the Buddha's palm as a backup technique. After all, the Monkey King was not that shameless. The Great Radiation Buddha's palm that he had learned was a peerless martial art that relied on himself and followed the laws of matter and energy of the world. It was a scientific method to pry open the energy foundation of the material world. Chun Ong had no way to use a mere few hundred words or over 1,000 words of profound words to record such a divine art. Hence, there was no secret manual. If there was a secret manual, it would definitely be the knowledge of the civilizations regarding particle energy. In a particle world, it would be nuclear energy. In a world of origin energy, it would be the energy of origin energy. The so-called Great Radiation Buddha's palm was actually the general theory of the internal energy in the form of radiation, such as light and heat. It was a research subject that involved the endless laws of the universe, matter, energy, space, and information. Based on the scientific level of Earth in the early 21st century, it took up about 1/3 of the knowledge. This meant that if one wanted to learn this peerless martial art, the most basic requirement on Earth was to understand 1/3 of the scientific knowledge in the history of Earth. Moreover, this was only the lower limit. It could only be said that 1/3 of the areas that Earth's scientific level touched were included in this divine art. What Chenong gave to Monkey King was only a record of his human body modification experiment in the God space. There wasn't much content. Monkey King needed to conduct scientific research according to the basic laws of the universe, deepen his understanding of the essence of energy, and then develop it on this basis. It was because Earth sensed this peerless martial art that corresponded to the great sun that they followed his heart so decisively. Xuanzang, or rather, Golden Cicada, raised his head and said, "Monkey King, Buddha is merciful." The sun quietly rose from the horizon, sprinkling down endless sunlight. The light rays suddenly outlined vivid curves in the sky. The faint golden curves converged to form an incomparably huge face outside Earth. It was the Buddha. The Buddha's back was facing the sun, and the great sun was like a halo hanging behind his head. He sat facing Earth, and behind him was the endless starry sky of the universe. A palm came from beyond the heavens. It was formless and intangible, but it also had form and substance. It was different from the peerless martial art Buddha's palm. It used true qi to push the six senses, wisdom, true qi, physical body, and heaven and earth. It was purely summoning the golden body of Buddha and smashing down with the palm. Monkey King also smashed his palm toward the great sun in the east. His powerful magic power followed the basic laws, triggering the restless vitality inside the great sun, and the vitality fused. The fission turned into radiation energy, boundless light, and boundless heat. Monkey King placed one palm in front of his chest and bowed toward the great sun. It looked like he was worshiping Buddha, but he wasn't worshiping Buddha, but the great sun Sakyamuni wasn't the great sun Buddha. The sun was the great sun Buddha that he worshipped. It could also be called the Great Radiation Buddha. The first move of the Great Radiation Buddha's palm that Chenong created was called the first appearance of radiant light. And the first move of the Great Radiation Buddha's palm that Monkey King supplemented was the Monkey King's gratitude for the teachings of his master. He worshipped the great sun as if he was worshipping Chenong. It was called the stone monkey worshipping Buddha. It could also be called the solar particle ray burst, or the absolute sun annihilation divine ray. Xuanzang raised his head and looked toward the east. He saw the huge star behind the Buddha's head, the great sun, suddenly striking out with a palm. Boundless radiation gathered into a sea, and a huge flame tongue erupted. The flame tongue was the size of Earth, and it contained boundless alpha, beta, and gamma rays. It was the manifestation of vitality, and it could also be called the Sun Divine Ray, Young Sun Divine Ray, Old Sun Divine Ray, and Absolute Sun Divine Ray. Through a complicated chain reaction, everything in its path was burned into radiation. This palm was actually not struck out by the Monkey King. It was the Monkey King's great sun greeting, and the great sun struck out with a divine palm. The insanity of it made one's hair stand on end. For a moment, a comical scene appeared in the world. Outside the earth, the golden body of Buddha's palm smashed toward the Monkey King. However, the great sun behind Buddha also struck out with a palm, smashing toward Tathagata. It was just like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind it. Tathagata's palm could overturn the mountains and rivers. Only this palm came crashing down from the sky. This heaven-toppling divine might was only targeted at the Monkey King. Although the area covered by the divine palm was almost immeasurable, encompassing half of the earth, the divine palm was as light as a feather to the other plants and trees. It was like a light breeze, and it posed no threat at all. It was only targeted at the Monkey King, who was a monkey. The great radiation divine palm behind Tathagata's head wrapped in boundless divine light of the sun's true fire. It came in contact with the back of Tathagata's head, incinerating everything. After all, the radiation was close to the speed of light. The speed of the great radiation divine palm was unimaginably fast. It was one step ahead of Tathagata and came into contact with the Dharma form. Facing the great radiation divine palm, the Tathagata Dharma form was destroyed inch by inch when it came into contact with the great radiation divine palm. The great radiation divine palm in the sky was getting closer and closer, but the Monkey King was still standing tall. He didn't care and faced it indifferently. When the divine palm was a few thousand meters away from touching him, an unimaginably huge divine light spread down along the Buddha's arm bit by bit. Finally, when the divine palm landed 3 feet above the Monkey King's head, the entire divine palm was incinerated and completely collapsed. The Monkey King said indifferently, "Xuanzang, your divine palm is only SOSO." Wukong could retract and release the great radiation divine palm freely. Although this world annihilation divine palm had shocked the Earth monarch so much that he was trembling in fear, after Wukong retracted his palm, the boundless radiation force was all swept back into the sun. It didn't harm a single plant on Earth. The meaning behind it was even more terrifying than the boundless power of the great radiation divine palm. Jin was dumbfounded. The sound of his Zen heart shattering rang in everyone's ears. Xuanzang was also in disbelief. The reincarnators were so shocked that their souls left their bodies. Zhuang Baifan said in a trembling voice, "Was I hallucinating just now?" Chapter 1005. Xuanzang knelt on the ground weakly, his hands propped up on the ground. The scratches on his hands were burning with pain. Between the memories of his past life and this life, he said weakly, "How did this happen?" Xuanzang raised his hands and looked at his trembling and scarred palms. Then he looked up at the divine monkey, who was standing in the ruins with a stick on his back. A sense of exhaustion came from the bottom of his heart like a tide. The Buddha lost. Xuanzang was speechless. The Monkey King walked towards him and said, "Your palm technique is weak, far less powerful than the original version of Sakyamuni. Back then, I also broke one of Sakya's hands. That's why I was given the title of Victorious Fighting Buddha by the deities of the 3 realms. Although Sakya gave it to me on purpose, it was also because my master gave me the peerless divine weapon, the Star Stabilizer Divine Metal. But this illustrious reputation was also earned by me, the Monkey King, one stick at a time. At this time, Zhuang Baifan had completely given up on thinking deeply about the subtext behind Wukong's words. He just treated it as a dream and all sorts of absurd and bizarre thoughts. He said sluggishly, "What the F*CK, God of War?" But looking at it from another perspective, this setting is really F*King cool. Buddha can also be defeated? Xuanzang looked up blankly. Of course. The Monkey King said, "In this world, no one is invincible. You treat the Buddha as a god, so of course you can't accept his defeat. But Sakya was just a human in the beginning. In the beginning, before he became a Buddha, some disciples betrayed him and were refuted by the 6 heretic teachers. They were even expelled by the Brahmin. Even if he became a Buddha, when his homeland, Sakya, was destroyed by foreign troops and the Sakya clan was massacred, wasn't he still powerless? When Sakya became a Buddha, he won't be defeated, and he can't be defeated. It was Himayana disciples who pushed him to the altar. From then on, there was no more Sakya, only Buddha Tathagata. But Tathagata isn't Sakyamuni. Therefore, Sakya was able to lose to me because of his magnanimity. He helped me achieve my victorious fighting Buddha goal. Tathagata, on the other hand, cannot be defeated. A Sakya who can be defeated, or a Tathagata who is like a clay puppet on the altar, who is not even allowed to be defeated, who is closer to enlightenment. The Monkey King sighed. That's why your realized palm is only SOSO. Even if you have the power, you still can't change anything. Monkey King looked at Xianzong and said, "This is the second lesson I'm going to teach you. Face reality." Sakya was faced with reality, so he was an enlightened person. He chose to avoid some things, but he also chose to face some things. And Tathagata is omnipotent. You guys raised him too high, so he can't come down. Therefore, facing reality, he is omnipotent, and he can't become numb. Is it so hard to admit that you can't do it? Monkey King questioned. Just like you have the power and realized palm, but you still lost. Xianzong was speechless. The Monkey King continued, because you don't want to admit that you are powerless, you see all kinds of unfairness, injustice, resentment, and hatred in the world, so you come up with all kinds of excuses, lies, and deceptions. It's because Buddha is powerless, but you say that all living beings reap what they sow. Because when you sit by and watch the world's unfairness, injustice, resentment, hatred, and all kinds of suffering, you are powerless to do anything about it and can only escape. However, you say that you are omnipotent, so that helplessness becomes numbness. Because you don't want to admit this numbness, you come up with all kinds of lies, saying that all living beings reap what they sow, and that Buddha is still omnipotent. How sad. What a joke. The reason why I'm standing in front of you is to destroy your beliefs. Monkey King asked coldly, "Let me ask you, Chun Xuanzong, I only ask you today, can Buddha save all living beings?" Xianzong put his palms together and said with difficulty, Buddha's Dharma can save all living beings." Goku continued to ask, "Then tell me, how can I save him? As long as everyone has a compassionate heart, as long as everyone converts to Buddha, there will be no more suffering in the world." Xianzong raised his head and said with difficulty under the pressure of Monkey King. Stubborn. Monkey King said with disappointment, "Fine, I'll show you the truth today." After saying that, Wukong leaped and landed in front of the old temple's lone grave. The surrounding 5,000 li of land was almost destroyed in an instant, but this old temple was still perfectly preserved. Monkey King looked at the grave that Xianzong had erected for Miss Duan. He laughed coldly and reached out, lifting up Miss Duan's grave amidst Xuanzong's shrill cries. A skeleton, wearing Miss Duan's clothes, laid there quietly. Magician frowned. How is this possible? How did she turn into a skeleton so quickly? Zhuang Baifan frowned as well. What is Monkey King trying to do? Xuanzong wailed and rushed forward. He clawed at the soil with his hands and feet and held the skeleton in his arms. He said to Wukong, "What else do you want? You said that you won't implicate the innocent. She's already dead. What else do you want? Are you going to turn her into ashes before you'll be happy? Are you going to prove that Buddha can't save all living beings?" Monkey King didn't retort, only saying coldly, "Look again." He pointed at Xianzang's chest, but the skeleton was gone. Xianzong felt a weight on his chest. He looked down and saw a white jade statue of Guanyin Bodhisattva. He didn't know when it happened, but it had replaced the skeleton. Monkey King continued, "Chun Xuanzong, why don't you think about why someone would be so infatuated with you the moment they laid eyes on you? Why is there someone who refuses to come to their senses after hearing your sarcastic words? Why would Miss Duan like you? Why would the amorphous hoops fall into your hands? Do you really believe that it's because of your courage? Do you really believe that an ordinary exorcist could coincidentally spell out the Vairocana Sutra? Do you really believe that there's such a thing as unconditional love in this world?" Monkey King and Zhuang Baifan said in unison, "Unless it's fate. It's fated that this girl will fall in love with you. It's fated that she will die in your arms. It's fated that you will be the one to retrieve the sutra." Monkey King said calmly, "Then what is fated?" Xianzong stared blankly at the white jade statue of Guanyin Bodhisattva in his arms. Monkey King said, "Miss Duan is just a karma that Guanyin Bodhisattva enlightened you. Your love is fated. Her every frown, every smile, every tear, although they come from her heart, what does her sincerity amount to? Compared to that, what does your sincerity amount to? Do you love Guanyin Bodhisattva?" Monkey King saw the fear on Xianzang's face and asked, "What is Miss Duan? Now, tell me, as one of the living beings, how did Buddha save you? Does Miss Duan count as one of the living beings?" Monkey King asked. Under Monkey King's questioning, Xianzang's expression changed from shock to sadness, and finally, he was stunned. He pondered for a long time and felt that his Zen heart was on the verge of collapse. He couldn't help but hate Miss Duan for fooling him, but he couldn't help but think of the adorable yet clumsy scribbles on the back of the sutra. He asked himself, "Putting myself in her shoes, is Miss Duan deceiving me? Is her love fake?" Xuanzang gave a negative answer. In the illusion that day, he saw himself and Miss Duan's heart clearly like never before. Only then did Xuanzang let go of the white jade statue of Guanyin Bodhisattva in his hand. He stood up and left the tomb without hesitation. He asked Monkey King, "Mr. Sun, can I ask you a question?" Monkey King said, "Go ahead. I'll try my best to answer you." Xuanzang raised his head and asked calmly, "Where did Miss Duan go?" Yukong said, "The rise and fall of karma, the fusion of karma. There will be a day when karma disperses. For you, Miss Duan is already dead." Then to Bodhisattva, "What is Miss Duan?" Xuanzang continued. Yukong smiled and said, "It's just a little trouble. I understand." Xuanzang closed his eyes and thanked Monkey King. "Thank you, Mr. Sun." Magician suddenly felt that something was wrong with the demon-revealing mirror in his hand. He looked down and saw that Sun Wukong's figure was still shining brightly, but Xuanzang's figure was split into two. A monk chanting in a daze had his back facing Xuanzang, who was crying at the sky. The two figures became clearer. Magician was shocked. Monkey King didn't have second thoughts, but Xuanzang did. The Buddha's palm Buddha's doubt after his defeat, the sorrow of learning that Miss Duan's fate was destined, the doubt of Sun Wukong's interrogation, the uneasiness of asking Buddha if he could save all living beings, the desolation of being alone for a lifetime, the guilt of having only the love of his life, the pain of the struggle between heaven and man, and the craziness of all these forcing the Zen heart to waver. Under the five-finger mountain, in the old temple, in the reflection of the world, the five strange pearls that were in a strange state seemed to sense the messy emotions in Xuanzang's heart. Threads of emotions seemed to merge with the five strange pearls. Magician felt the change, and his expression changed. "Oh no!" Zhuang Baifeng and the rest turned around and saw Magician panicking. "How can this be? Why are the five beads moved by Xuanzang?" "What five beads?" Zhuang Baifeng asked with a frown. Magician was terrified. The five beads came from the mysterious world of heavenly weapons. The 10 beads of the ancestor sky demon body were split. When Magician and his team were in the mysterious world of heavenly weapons, they paid an unimaginable price to bring back 3 demonic weapons and 5 beads that had yet to become demonic weapons. Magician came to the westward journey world to use the beads and the hybrid demons. Their team had painstakingly collected the demonic faith from the wind and cloud world, fire phoenix world, and other worlds. Together with the Kirin demon blood, the hybrid demons, and the 5 beads that had been cultivated, they could trigger the demonic thoughts of Xianzang, Zhu Ganglai, Sha Wujing, Monkey King, and the rest. Together with the demon-revealing mirror, they could cut out the beads of the two-hearted demons. This way, they could destroy the two-hearted demons of their previous lives and obtain a lot of rewards. At the same time, they could obtain 5 earth-shattering demonic weapons. The reason why they dared to say that they wanted to kill the Monkey King was because they wanted to use the demonic weapons to create a Monkey King who only had crazy demonic thoughts and no rationality. This was the only way to bypass Buddha and kill the Monkey King. But the only thing they miscalculated was the true strength of the Monkey King. At this moment, Xianzang had awakened the golden cicada's 9 lives Zen heart, but it was shaken by the Monkey King. As the demonic thoughts grew, the 9 lives Zen heart gave birth to a shocking demonic thought that exceeded Magician's imagination. It broke through Magician's restriction and triggered the instinct of the beads, causing the 5 beads to respond at once. Behind the golden cicada's 9 lives Zen heart, The demonic thoughts that had accumulated for 9 lives transformed into 2 hearts and were about to cut out of Xianzang's body and turn into a terrifying demon. Magician's forehead was covered in sweat as he said in disbelief, "How is this possible? Even a near-god like Emperor Xianzong could only produce 1 bead. According to our calculations, the Monkey King only needs 2 beads to contain his demonic nature. Why is it that his demonic nature can't contain 5 beads even after activating 5 beads? Why are they being controlled by Chun Xuanzong's 2 hearts? Originally, it should have been 5 different demon orbs without any intelligence. It shouldn't have been this kind of demon orb that was controlled by 2 minds and still retained the intelligence of the original body. It should have been 5 demon orbs, but it was too late to say anything now. The 5 beads shot out from the 5 beads and entered the back of Xianzang's head. The image of a handsome and refined young monk wearing a moon-white kasaya appeared behind Xianzang. He had a pair of spirited eyes that seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Behind those seemingly intelligent and penetrating eyes, there was actually an endless amount of madness. A demon bead appeared in his hand and transformed into a 9-ringed staff. Another bead turned into a purple-gold alms bowl. Another bead turned into an embroidered kasaya. Another bead was imbued with his demonic body, turning it into an ethereal form. The last bead turned into an ink-colored relic that floated behind his head. The monk walked out of the void and slowly walked over. His every movement was elegant and calm. He said, "This humble monk's dharma name is Sanzang. I came from Chun Xuanzong's Zen heart and was enlightened by benefactor Monkey King. I understood the Buddha's dharma and returned to the truth. This humble monk's dharma name is a demonic heart that buries the heavens, buries the earth, and buries the common people." As he finished speaking, he struck out with his palm. Tang Sanzang laughed maniacally and said, "Let this humble monk send you off." The body formed by the beads was abnormally tall, but the palm formed by magic power was almost as tall as the 5 Fingers Mountain. Abe Saimai roared angrily, and 800 Shikigami appeared around him. He wanted to block the attack, but the speed at which the Shikigami were defeated by Tang Sanzang's palm was so fast that Abe couldn't react in time. He screamed in fear and was smashed into meat paste. All the Shikigami broke out of his body along with his blood essence and were devoured by Tang Sanzang. At this moment, Monkey King sighed in front of Xuanzang and said, "I'm not the king of the fiendish demons because I stopped being one a long time ago. But you have truly given birth to a king of the fiendish demons." Chapter 1006. Tang Sanzang was taller than the average person. His face was pale, but glowed like the moonlight. He was extremely delicate and slender. He even had a scholarly aura that even Xuanzang didn't have. He was like a Confucian monk. Half of him was refined and elegant. The other half was demonic. Magicians saw many dangerous things in the eyes of such a gentle monk. In comparison, Xianzang's eyes were as blank as a shell that had been stripped clean, withered, and weightless. In Tang Sanzang's eyes, however, there was a heavy weight. On one hand, it was a crazy, demonic nature that wanted to burn the world to ashes. On the other hand, there seemed to be fuel hidden deep within that demonic nature that supported the burning of the demonic nature. It was sincere, the purest love. The Monkey King saw through Xuanzang's disloyalty. He said calmly, "When the medicine Fort Gong Wang established, he said to the millions and billions of people, 'From love comes worry, from love comes fear. If you are separated from love, there is no worry or fear.'" On the surface, Tang Sanzang looked even more otherworldly than Xuanzang. It was as if he wasn't a person of the mortal world. It was as if he came from the 9 heavens and descended from the clouds, transcending the mortal world. But this power that transcended the mortal world seemed to come from the pain in his heart. Because of the pain, he transcended the mortal world. Because of the pain, he became real. Because of the pain, he became a demon. That was disloyalty. Sanzang's palm in front of his chest was slender and clean. However, there were slivers of clear and dirty blood and the various viciousness of the 800 form gods and demons. The vengeful spirits of the form gods, or rather, their innate nature as demons, all wrapped around Sanzang's body, constantly wailing. In the wailing of the ghosts, the monk became more otherworldly, but also more demonic. Zhuang Baifan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He said with a trembling voice, "What should we do?" Abe died without being able to fight back. Magician calmed down and said seriously, "There are mistakes. If we can't kill the Monkey King, killing Tang Sanzang will be worth it. I don't believe he's scarier than the Monkey King." Tang Sanzang chuckled and said, "9 lifetimes ago, I was the golden cicada. I didn't listen to the Dharma, and I rashly refuted the Dharma. In the 9 reincarnations, even though they had the heart of Buddha, their nature was not complete. There were even some who were reprimanded by the Buddha, which gave birth to resentment and hatred. In this life of reincarnation, he was infatuated with a mortal girl. This was infatuation. When he found out the truth, he was angry when he found out that this woman was just troubled by the nameless bodhisattva. The demon king, Monkey King, broke the Buddha's palm and shattered my Zen heart. This is despair. Because of one thing, Miss Duan was innocently attacked. Fate came and went, so he felt guilty. From then on, questioning the Dharma and going astray because of emotions is bigotry. A Zen heart possessed by the devil, trying in vain to use peerless magic power to change everything. This was madness. After becoming a demon, all thoughts turn to dust. Only the demonic nature remains. It is empty and lonely, exceptionally lonely. Therefore, everything, arrogance, hatred, obsession, anger, despair, guilt, stubbornness, madness, loneliness, help me become a demon." Jin Gang Ji said in fear, "Venerable Xuanzang, you must not let your heart waver from your 9 lives of cultivation." Xuanzang, who was about to turn grayish-white, only silently placed his hand on his chest and said softly, "The Buddha is merciful." Tang Sanzang laughed and pinched Jin Gang Ji's head. He said softly to Xuanzang, "Even now, you still want the Buddha to be merciful? Trash! Where's the Buddha? The Buddha is nothing. When you are in despair and pain, is there any use in praying to the Buddha? Instead of praying to the Buddha, it is better to pray to yourself. Praying to the Buddha is not as good as becoming a demon. All the tragedies are because you are powerless. Back then, as its second disciple, didn't I enter the reincarnation cycle just like that? Then, what about everything in the reincarnation cycle? Is the one tormenting you? Is there any use in cultivating Buddhism? If I didn't become a demon, I would have achieved enlightenment. If I didn't become a demon, I would have achieved enlightenment. What about you?" Sanzang said to Jin Gang Ji in disdain, "In the end, you're still a door guard. You still talk about saving all living beings from suffering, about being merciful. I can only see one word in all the scriptures: power." Jin Gang Ji's eyes widened in anger. The corners of his eyes cracked, and golden tears of blood seeped out of his eyes. He roared at Xuanzang, "Venerable Xuanzang, subdue your heart. Don't waste the efforts of the bodhisattvas and the Buddha to enlighten you. This second heart is only formed by the external demon stirring up the internal demon. If the internal demon is subdued, the external demon is just a facade. It is definitely not your match." Sanzang sneered, "Not his match. Oomph. Then, Chan Xuanzang, even if you cultivate for another 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years, will you be that monkey's match? So-called fate is just the strong manipulating the weak. Yesterday, you were powerless when Zhu Ganglai killed Miss Duan in the illusion. Today, you are still powerless when it comes to Miss Duan, whose vexation of Guanyin dissipated. I was born to prevent this kind of helplessness from ever happening again. I want the heavens to no longer be able to cover my eyes. I want the earth to no longer be able to bury my heart. I want all living beings to understand my will. I want all the Buddhas to disappear." Tang Sanzang pointed at the sky and roared furiously, "Tathagata, you say that I look down on a Buddhist Dharma, but what is your Buddhist Dharma? What right do you have to not be questioned? How can I, Golden Cicada, not have the right to question you? Today, I've established myself as a demon and destroyed your Buddhist dharma. What do you do about it? With the Monkey King's shattering palm and the afterglow of the sun's true flames, the originally clear blue sky glowed a fiery red. At that moment, the fiery red surged once again, becoming redder and redder. It was enchanting and suffused with the color of blood. The blood-red clouds surged, and the faint rumbling of thunder could be heard from the horizon. However, Sanzang was fearless. He laughed at the sky. As Zhu Ganglai listened, he suddenly noticed Sanzang's gaze turning towards him. He quickly waved his hand and said, "This has nothing to do with me. Master, this is something you've done yourself. I, your disciple, can only watch from the side." Wu Jing also nodded and said, "No matter who it is, they are both my masters." At this time, magician Zhuang Baifan, Hans, and the others exchanged glances and suddenly made a move. Magician was a reincarnator who pursued mysticism. Even Zhuang Baifan and the others only knew that magician's strengthening system was related to a profession called secret spell master. From the name, it seemed that magician was a master of magic. However, the reason why mystics were called mystics was because others would never be able to see through the shadows under their veil, whether they were disguised or real. Therefore, when magician slowly flipped his hands, magic runes appeared on his fingertips. Complicated geometric patterns connected the runes, and a strange magic formation that represented sealing and transformation appeared. Zhuang Baifan, Ma Ku, and the others cursed in unison. It's actually the Marvel Multiverse Magic Enhancement. Interesting little thing. Sanzang looked at Magician with interest. Magician flipped his right hand, and an ancient bronze mirror appeared in the center of the magic formation. Magician blocked the bronze mirror in front of him and shouted to the others, "Do it." Zhuang Baifan stretched out both of his hands, and a magical mirror with black and white yin and yang fishes slid down from his sleeves. His right hand performed an incantation gesture, and a magical mirror was activated. Even Reverend Hans held up a Western-style big mirror with a silver frame, which was unusually luxurious. Ramal Khan, who had a head full of sweat and was extremely nervous, quickly mumbled an incantation. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the turban wrapped around his head. Magician looked at the floating mirrors and gritted his teeth. He pointed at Abe with his left hand, and a bronze mirror with the patterns of various mythical beasts was sucked into his hand. "Lend me your power," Magician roared. Zhuang Baifan and the others hesitated for a moment. Seeing that Sanzang had no intention of stopping him, they sighed inwardly and let go of the power controlling their magic mirrors. The four mirrors shot towards Magician like swallows returning to the forest. Magician's hands kept moving the magic formation, and it quickly split into 6 shield-sized magic formations made of different runes and geometric patterns. The 6 magic formations formed a hexagon and slowly rotated around Magician. Monkey King, who was watching from the side, noticed something. He smiled. This little guy is quite opportunistic. Zhu Ganglai moved to his side and asked, "What does the great sage have to say?" Wu Kong said, "The magic power that this little guy cultivates should be similar to cultivating the path of divinity. Just like that group of people who perform the Great God Dance, they all borrow the external power of gods and Buddhas. Most of the formations in his palm involve spatial coordinates and energy projection. Although I, old son, am not proficient in them, I still manage to figure out some ways. If he wants to cultivate this magic to a high level, he must have the cooperation of gods and Buddhas. The essence is to borrow their power. This person is quite clever. Some of the magic formations borrow external power from a wide range of sources. I can see a few that borrow the power of the sun, moon, and stars. There are also some that borrow the vital energy of the earth beneath their feet. It's a pity that he hasn't adjusted this formation before, and the deviation of the formation data is too great. The efficiency is a little low. This person probably doesn't have the ability to modify the formation data according to the specific situation here. So he set his sights on the tools used by people with higher cultivation. He found those divine weapons and used their power to lock onto some powerful grotto heavens. Idiot, what kind of artifact shape do you think is the most suitable to bear the power of a grotto heavens? Zhu Ganglai said, a cauldron suppresses an area, and a mirror divides two worlds. Among the various artifact shapes, only the magic mirror has a world of its own. That's right, Monkey King said. Rather than a mirror, it's better to call it a well. In the many experimental records passed down by my master, there's such a mirror-making method. There's a strange ability to create a well of energy in the void. The theory behind it is just to connect two worlds and absorb the power of the grotto heavens. Zhu Gonglia's eyes shone with a strange light, and he said greedily, where did those people come from? They actually got their hands on so many good things. Old pig, also came from the sky, but I don't have such wealth. Each of the 6 magic mirrors has a strange ability behind them, and they're all grotto heavens. Can my master withstand the power of those strange grotto heavens? Chapter 1007. The magician waved his left hand, and the 6 magic mirrors around him began to rotate until he chose one of them. It was the magic mirror of the witches in the fairy tale world, but it had been refined by immortal Hans using the way of cultivation. On the magician's right wrist, a light silver rune wheel appeared. It was translucent like glass. He pressed his right hand on the mirror that looked like a woman's dressing mirror. The rune wheel on his wrist rotated slowly. As the rune wheel rotated, the space around him distorted. Countless glass-like mirrors that distorted light appeared in this space. With magician as the center, they distorted the space around him. As the glass-like texture slowly spread, the space around Mo Sanzang became more and more like a space filled with mirrors and crystals. The entire space seemed to be isolated from the real world. Magician said in a low voice, "Mirror, Minotaur Labyrinth." Magician was a little pleased with himself. As a fragile mage, Dr. Strange had always been infatuated with hot-blooded close combat, fighting to his heart's content with his fists. He would fight head-on against mages and legendary warriors like Thanos. He believed that fists were the true romance of mages. But Magician knew very well that he didn't have the main character's aura, so he wouldn't have the true luck of having a 50% chance of winning. Many battles had shown that when encountering the lunatics of the spatial martial Dao, a mage would always have to hide, keep a distance, and find cover. Only a mage that couldn't be hit was an invincible mage. Otherwise, even a legend wouldn't be able to defend against a stab in the back. Thus, he focused on learning the D&D spell system and combined it with the spells of the Paragon sorcerers. In the end, he found inspiration from the space spells that sorcerers usually use to open up a battlefield and avoid damage to the real world. He developed the Mirror Labyrinth spell, which could create a spatial labyrinth around him. Generally speaking, the area covered by a space maze was only 10 meters in the real world. However, in a 10-meter space maze, there were countless inverted spatial structures. Sometimes, an inch of distance could be as long as several kilometers. Sometimes there were up, down, left, right, and inside and outside reverse spaces. This chaotic and complicated space could render almost any long-range attack ineffective. At the same time, there were 81 teleportation portals in the maze. The magician could banish anyone within 30 feet of him at will. He could also attack from any direction through the teleportation mirror. This was almost the absolute domain of a magician. Ever since this spell was developed, a magician's strongest state was when they were within 30 feet of him. However, magician wasn't satisfied with just this. He attempted to expand the range of his labyrinth spell in the real world. He wanted to make it so that not only was the mirror-like distorted space that cut off light, but the spirit world, shadow world, and other planes that were in the same place as the real world would also be distorted. It even affected time, causing space-time to distort in the maze. However, the power required for such a spell was far from what a magician could provide. Finally, after investigation, it was found that the magic mirror refined by spiritual master Hans had the special essence to realize this spell. In a magic mirror, there was a mirror plane that was completely opposite to the real world. With the power of the mirror plane, Magician could switch the space in a mirror maze with a mirror plane at will. He could banish the enemy's attack, part of their body, or even their entire body into the magic mirror. He could use this space switch to make the enemy's weapon always be thousands of kilometers away from him, but he would not be affected. He could achieve another level of, I can hit you, but you can't hit me. This perfectly reflected the most rogue side of a magician. After developing the labyrinth spell, Magician was promoted from a mage to a mage who could beat losers. After realizing the Mirror Minotaur Labyrinth, Magician was finally promoted from a mage to a legendary cheat. The power of the magic mirror lies in reality and illusion. Spiritual Master Hans's expression was a little solemn. At this time, he was quite sure that he, Zhuang Baifeng, and the others did not come to this world by chance. It was definitely the result of Magician's plan. A magician definitely wanted to kill him. Or rather, he wanted to kill everyone. Perhaps each mirror represented a magic that the magician could not complete. If he could get all the mirrors, he might be able to use these mirrors to communicate with the plane and achieve a breakthrough from a secret master to a Penglock, ignite the tinder, and break through the fourth gate of God. At this time, Zhuang Baifeng no longer regarded the plot characters as his greatest enemy. Instead, he placed Magician first. Monkey King only curled his lips in disdain. Magician was just a cheat, but Monkey King had long been a scientist who created cheats. Since ancient times, scientists had created cheats. No matter how strong a cheat was, it would wither in the face of a new version. Only a scientist who could continuously create cheats could touch the root of the power of the game. It's just a space labyrinth. I can shatter it with one punch. Monkey King calculated in his mind. Even if Magician's maze was developed to its maximum, he only needed to raise the gravity to the level of a white dwarf. He didn't even need to use the power of a black hole to shatter it. Under such powerful gravity, any space-time spell would only be able to fold a piece of white paper. Even if Magician was like an origami warrior, it would be useless against a road roller. Sanzong stood in the space labyrinth, his hand gently reaching out from a glass mirror beside him. He chuckled softly. Interesting. At this time, Magician's expression was somewhat solemn. He discovered that no matter how he activated the magic mirror, he could not control the space within 1 meter of Sanzong. This made it difficult for him to open a spatial door right next to Sanzang's head or use a forbidden spell right next to his face. He couldn't even move a part of Sanzang's body into the mirror or stuff a small nuclear bomb into his abdomen. Mirror. 6 consciousness destruction spell. The magician pressed his left hand against the true sutra mirror. The faint golden runic will spun slowly on his left wrist. 3 Zong suddenly felt his eyes itch. He calmly reached out and scratched them. Then he opened his eyelids. A row of blunt teeth suddenly bit down behind his eyelids. A monster swallowed Sanzang's eyeball from his left eye. Like a worm, its mouth filled with blunt teeth occupied the monster's entire face. It swallowed Sanzang's eyeball. At the same time, different monsters appeared from Sanzang's various organs. However, Sanzang's expression did not change. He continued smiling calmly. At this moment, something that looked like insect limbs or octopus tentacles extended out of 3 Zhang's eyes, throat, tongue, ears, and nostrils. A hand extended out of his stomach. Under his skin, the hair in his blood vessels spread out. His feet began to fester. Fingers wriggled in the rotten flesh. However, Sanzong began to laugh. When he opened his mouth, his tongue had already disappeared. Instead, there were 8 spider-like compound eyes that shone with green light at his throat. At this moment, a snake-like strip of flesh suddenly extended from Sanzang's throat and devoured the monster that had eaten Sanzang's tongue. The sticky strip of flesh replaced the tongue and helped Sanzong speak. Why are you pretending to be a monster in front of me? The limbs and tentacles at his ears and nostrils suddenly struggled violently, but in the end, they were dragged into his ears and nostrils in despair. Sanzang's facial organs produced the sound of his cuticles being crushed and fluids gushing out. His blood vessels suddenly wriggled like worms. They grabbed the spreading hair and tore it apart inch by inch. Countless tentacle-like flesh sprouted from the festering flesh on his legs. They wrapped around the fingers and dragged them into his body. His eyeball suddenly opened its mouth and tore out from the flesh worm monster's abdomen. One of them stood on Sanzang's head, while the other stood on the bridge of his nose. They looked at Magician. Every part of Mo Sanzang's body laughed at the same time. There were all sorts of voices of men, women, and children. You don't understand my existence. Xianzong looked at Sanzong, who was becoming more and more bizarre. He only closed his eyes indifferently and told himself, "That's not me. That's not me. That's not me." Sanzang's eyeball suddenly jumped off the bridge of his nose and hovered before his chest. He opened his mouth full of sharp teeth and said, "I don't need anything else. I can kill you with just one eyeball." Ha ha! The pupil in the middle of the eyeball clearly reflected Sanzang's figure as he laughed maniacally. He said to Magician, "Have you seen this symbol before?" As he spoke, the blood vessels in the whites of his eyes suddenly spread out and formed the image of a reverse talisman. Then, in Magician's widened eyes, in the reflection of his pupil, the world turned into a pool of flesh and blood. Countless squirming, trembling flesh and blood formed from countless blood vessels, fat, and muscles. Countless huge hands made of flesh and blood suddenly reached out of the entire world of flesh and blood. Then Zhuang Baifan and the others saw Sanzang's figure suddenly strike out from the pupil of the eyeball hovering before Mo Sanzang's chest. Countless twisting tentacles shot out from Magician's pupil, intertwining to form a huge muscular hand. It burrowed out from Magician's eye, grabbed Magician, and dragged him into his pupil. Then, the Magician in the space-time labyrinth disappeared without a trace. Zhuang Baifan heard a cracking sound in his ears. He knew that it was the sound of his teeth chattering and hitting against his gums. On the other side, Hans was as cowardly as a dog. Mark raised his hands and shouted in standard Chinese, "I surrender. I admit defeat. Boss, please give me a chance." Mo Sanzang slowly pushed his eyeball back into his own eye socket. His entire body returned to its original delicate and quiet appearance. But the reincarnators would never forget what kind of crazy state this thin and elegant body was. The Monkey King slowly clapped his hands and said, as expected of the King of Fiends, "Such a refreshing style. I, old son, am willing to give up my title of the King of Fiends for 500 years to you. In the future, you will be the King of Fiends, Chun Xuanzong." Xuanzong hugged his head and denied, "That's not me. That's not me. I'm a normal person. Buddha's palm isn't like that." Mo Sanzang said, "This is just a small trick that I've comprehended. It's derived from Buddha's palm and can be called reversed Buddha's palm. That is the first form of reversed Buddha's palm. All things are equal. If all things are equal, then I want to be more equal than him. I want all things to be equal and give life to all things. This way, life will not be more noble than non-life. All things must be equal. Rocks must be equal to humans. Plants must be equal to animals. Therefore, all things must be able to prey on each other and compete with each other. Once all things are equal, the world will be united and all things will be equal. Equal life, equal death. My eyes are equal to me. My cells are equal to me. The bugs on my body are equal to me. And he actually wants to enslave those beings that are equal to him. Therefore, everything in this world will oppose him. Even his own body will oppose him. Unfortunately, I haven't comprehended the equality of souls. Otherwise, I would definitely be able to give souls to all things." Ugh! Xuanzong grabbed Jin Gang, Ji's arm, and vomited on the ground. However, nothing came out. Jin Gang, Ji said with a trembling voice, "Mo, demon. Demon my ass. Demon." Sanzang looked back at him impatiently. Hypocrite who oppresses cells and slaughters lives. With that, Jin Gang Ji cells turned into tentacle monsters that devoured each other. They swallowed him, and then his flesh and blood turned into bugs. Sanzang said, "My realm is much higher than Buddha's. Who dares to say that they don't kill? Before Buddha becomes a Buddha, they also kill. They kill the bugs in their bodies, the viruses and bacteria that invade their bodies, and they trample the ants under their feet. I'm the only one who never kills. I only break down an entire body that oppresses other lives into countless free and equal lives. I won't harm a single cell. Of course, I can't stop them from harming each other. As for the bacteria and viruses that want to join me, I will always accept and accommodate them. I will never harm them. I will let them join me and become a part of me. Sanzang turned around and said to the reincarnators, "You think I killed them because you don't have the consciousness that all lives are equal. You think they were killed by me as a whole. You didn't expect that as a whole. They were formed from countless individuals. Their consciousness dominates and distorts those individuals. That's not equal. That's why I brought the concept of equality to those individuals. What you saw as a whole disappeared. However, the thousands of individuals flourished even more. That's why I didn't kill anyone. It was the free choice of the individuals that formed him. In the end," Sanzang concluded, "I don't care about the state of the whole. I only care about the dignity of each individual, their equality, freedom, and survival. True life is the basic individual of free life. They gather together as equals and form a single existence through democratic unity. You are all shameless existences that oppress and enslave individuals. That's why you aren't true life," Sanzang said. "All life is equal and all things are equal. There is no place for hypocritical life forms like you." The first stance of my reverse real poem is to create a world where all things are equal. I want to create a world where all lifeless existences become alive and all living beings are equal. Monkey King listened to Sanzang's speech with great interest. He nodded and savored it. Suddenly, he felt a weight on his leg. He looked down and saw Xianzong grabbing his leg. He said with difficulty, "Kill him. Great sage, help me kill him. Mr. Chun." Monkey King sighed. "I'm a peaceful and kind little monkey. How can you make me kill someone? He's not human," Xianzong said with difficulty. "Great sage, I've wronged you. You're not a demon. He is. Kill him. I can't let him continue existing." Monkey King squatted down and looked at Xianzong. "I can't. My master is very curious about your current state. He told me to focus on studying you and not destroy such a precious specimen. Mr. Chun, your current state is very—" Monkey King gestured at him and said, "Very rare." Monkey King said, "How about this? You give me the specimen and I'll bring it to other worlds. How about that?" Xuanzong stared at him. Yukong sighed and said, "Why don't you come with me?" What the two of them neglected was Sanzang excitedly reaching out his claws to the reincarnators. He smiled at Zhuang Baifeng and the others. "All of you are calling for equality. Do you hear that? They're calling for me to become one. Become one with me." Sanzang laughed maniacally. His powerful mind pollution almost drove the reincarnators crazy. Mako wailed as he was swallowed by Sanzang. Hans cried, "I knew it. The world of myths and legends is so scary." He wanted to summon heavenly fire and burn himself to ashes. Zhuang Baifeng frantically called the god of creation. "I'll accept my punishment. God, send me out of here. Mommy." At this time, Monkey King heard Chun Ang's cold snort. "The fated ones are almost all dead. What are you waiting for? Quickly store the specimen. Then follow the fated one to the place I prepared for you. The experimental conditions there are better. It's more than enough for you to complete the task I've given you." Monkey King was shocked. "Master, is Chun Xuanzong not the fated one? He's the master of that victorious fighting Buddha." Chenong said, "I said the fated one will bring fruits to you. But who said it has to be Chun Xuanzong? Those few idiots are the fated ones. Quickly, don't let them all die. It's very troublesome to trick them." Then, Chen Xuanzong, Monkey King was bewildered. Chenong said, "I gave you an assignment, but I didn't expect it. You can create such a strange Tang Trizong. It's completely different from the muscular demon monk, Iron Fist Grandmaster, Karmic Fire Devil Buddha, and so on. With such an interesting experimental specimen, even I am a little tempted. I know you still have some feelings for Chen Xuanzong. How about this? Quickly bring them and the fated one to the other side. You can act as a control group. When the time comes, you can help Chen Xuanzong become stronger. Then go and destroy Mo Sanzang. it's not a bad idea to do a practical test. I want to see how far they can go with their love-hate relationship. After saying that, a test tube was thrown out from the void. Goku had no choice but to shatter Imo Sanzang with a punch and stuff the remaining sample into the test tube. He carried the dumbfounded Chen Xuanzang and ran to the dying Zhuang Baifeng. He said nervously, "Fated person? Fated one, don't die." Chapter 1008. Thanos. A voice sounded in Thanos' mind, like the whispers of countless people overlapping. That voice said quietly, "Thanos, the universe has lost its balance. A terrible disaster is coming. Only you can save the entire universe." Slayer Tyrant felt that he had suddenly appeared in the void of the universe. Around him were countless wreckage and ruins, quietly floating in the dark universe. In the distance, there were 3 slowly rotating cantilevers of the Milky Way star. The beautiful Milky Way galaxy was shining several times brighter than usual. Amidst the radiance, countless majestic angels with blurry faces were formed from the convergence of endless radiance, hovering in the void. Behind them were innumerable stars that had cooled and combusted, and those angels were slaughtering. They had erased the habitable planets on the surface and were fighting against some magnificent battleships. There were also some relatively insignificant humans. Thanos had some impression of them. They were a mysterious force that had recently appeared in the Milky Way galaxy. They called themselves the Human Revolutionary Alliance and had a fierce conflict with the armies and races under Thanos' command. The huge battleships obviously had 3 different styles. However, those human warriors who were currently fighting against the Angel Legion could no longer be called humans. They were in fact surrounded by countless spatial bubbles that flickered with a faint light. Within these spatial bubbles, there was a powerful energy and substance that even Thanos would tremble in fear. These spatial bubbles were constantly exploding and forming again and again. Every time they bloomed, they caused harm to those angels. Every warrior here had the power to move Thanos. He even felt fear, because every existence here, or rather, every existence that was still alive and fighting, could easily erase him from the universe. And this was just an insignificant battlefield in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy was just an insignificant galaxy in the universe. Under the control of that inexplicable voice, Thanos saw countless galaxies outside the Milky Way galaxy. There, many galaxies have been extinguished, some have been burned out by the huge heat of chaos, and some had fallen into a cold, deathly stillness. Among the thousands of galaxies, there were only a few that still had light and life. Thanos saw countless planets and races disappear. He saw the destruction of thousands of galaxies. He saw the endless wreckage in the darkness of the universe. He saw that in those destroyed galaxies, there were thousands of existences that surpassed the angels. They destroyed everything with a wave of their hands. Countless quantum information gathered to form a huge consciousness. It was a concept of death that enveloped several galaxies after the death of a living being. In the ashes of the universe's destruction, the civilizations that were still resisting. He saw the heroes that fought to the end. Sunspots, Ombrin, Black Bat, Gonada, and even the planet devourer of that universe. The race that maintained the balance of the universe was a group of crystal-like minds. Their collective consciousness became the planet devourer of this universe. However, these were the only survivors of civilization after the destruction of the previous era. They had the mission to maintain the balance of the universe and were the gods of the universe's immune system. Yet, all that was left was a huge wreckage. Thanos was drowned by the sadness and fear brought about by this terrifying truth. He found it hard to look at the tragic war that had spread across the entire universe, the plague of destruction, the vast death, and the famine that was the remnants of civilization. Countless civilizations were about to die, leaving behind only their corpses that would be thrown into the boundless darkness. The voice replied, "This is not the tragedy of a single universe, but the destruction of the entire multiverse. You think that this is the end. No, this is the beginning. The war had already begun long before the timeline you could imagine. An unparalleled darkness is invading the multiverse. To fight against it, all the great beings in the universe, the tribunal of life, the heart of the universe, the transcending gods, the observer, the celestial group, and the goddess of vengeance, had offered their power to the only 5 gods that could protect the multiverse: eternity, infinity, death, oblivion, and the convergence of countless civilizations after the destruction of countless universes. The planet Devourer. They're the multiverse itself. Only they could stop the invasion and destruction of that darkness. After the destruction of each universe, the power of the 5 gods of that universe will be dispersed to the 5 gods of other universes. It is by relying on this line of defense that we could struggle to survive in the tides of destruction of other universes. This is the great law of balance of the multiverse. Once the balance is broken, that universe will usher in its end, just like what you see. The history of the destroyed universe reappeared before Thanos' eyes. Images of countless wars and destruction flashed before his eyes. Such a tragic destruction caused Thanos to wail in pain. The balance of your universe is being broken. You must stop this situation from continuing. Thanos, the fate of the universe is in your hands. Only you can save this universe. Organize this unimaginable invasion of darkness. The voice finally sounded tired. Thanos raised his head and wailed. Who are you? Why did you choose me? The shadow of the voice finally appeared. He looked at Thanos silently. Thanos opened his eyes wide in disbelief. The voice said, I won't lie to you, Thanos, because I am you. The figure with purple skin and scars from the tragic war side. He was countless times stronger than Thanos. Thanos was silent for a long time before he stood up in the dark void. What do you want me to do? Only you can feel the balance. Thanos, the 5 gods each have their own opponents. Among them, the goddess of death. A hint of gentleness appeared in the eyes of Thanos. Her opponent is an existence that is also known as death. For the sake of distinction, we can call it the Death Knight. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Thanos said the name that was engraved in his heart. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that destroyed the Titan civilization. However, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of this universe are still in balance with the 5 gods. What you have seen is just a small part of their insignificant power. In your universe, the terrifying balance between the goddess of death and the Death Knight is getting out of control. She is gradually unable to fight against that darkness. The goddess of death represents the concept of death in the entire universe. However, her authority is being stripped away. In the war with the Death Knight, she gradually lost her power. In my universe, she finally lost. When she lost most of her power and fell beside me, I became her warrior to welcome that tragic and indescribable war. In the end, she died in my arms. I inherited some of her remaining power, but my power is insignificant to the usurpation of the concept of death in the entire universe. There is only one thing. In the end, the goddess of death told me the secret of how the Death Knight defeated her. Thanos, my universe can no longer be saved. I only hope that you can bear the hope of your universe. Slayer Tyrant clenched his fists. He closed his eyes, and the scene of another universe being destroyed repeated itself in his heart. A tear silently slid down. Slayer Tyrant opened his eyes and looked at his hands. I won't let this happen again. I will protect everything, even if I have to pay an unimaginable price. Tell me, how to stop the balance from getting out of control. That Thanos looked deeply at his parallel universe self and said, the power of the goddess of death comes from the death of this universe. In the long history of the universe, all life, without exception, will usher in the end. This kind of end represents the power of the goddess of death. Therefore, in theory, no one should be able to defeat her, because all the immortal beings in the universe, in order to resist the darkness, have given up eternal life and promised to die. However, the existence of the Death Knight is very unique. It was once the death of a civilization, the entangled form of the consciousness of countless lives after death. In the beginning, it was just a lowly existence. But under the nurture of that darkness, its power grew at a speed that we can't imagine. Before the goddess of death failed, she finally understood a part of its existence. The end of a life is death. This is the power of the goddess of death. But when it still exists, it has infinite possibilities, including infinite possibilities of death. Therefore, the power of death of life is not the most powerful at the moment of its death, but when it still has infinite possibilities, that is the superposition of infinite possibilities of death. That is the unknown death. The known death is far more powerful than the unknown death. With the advent of war, it is true that the existence of life has been eliminated, but this infinite possibility of death has also suddenly expanded. The unknown death has become unprecedentedly powerful, and this is part of the power of the Death Knight. As life becomes more and more prosperous, war and civilization continue to develop, the unknown death will become more and more powerful, until death itself is destroyed. This is the whole reason why the Death Knight sees the authority of the goddess of death. Therefore, if you want to maintain the balance, you must eliminate the unknown possibility of death in life. You must collapse the superposition of their infinite possibilities of death into a single reality. In other words, bring death to them. How many lives do I have to kill? Thanos said in pain. The unknown death against the known death. Although the death of life itself can bring the power of the goddess of death, that is insignificant compared to the power of death that has been constantly ending since the birth of the universe. So, countless concepts, data, and knowledge about death flowed into Thanos' mind. In an instant, Thanos received the knowledge transmitted by him from another universe and became unprecedentedly powerful. However, he also felt unprecedented pain. Such close contact with death brought him unimaginable damage. Thanos could sense the death of all living things. Now that he opened his eyes, he could see the death of all living things. He could kill all existences, but this experience brought him endless pain, because life should not know death. It's actually half. Thanos collapsed. I want to kill half of the lives in the universe with my own hands. Why? In the other universe, the purple skin of the Slayer Tyrant had already turned gray. At the moment when he was about to die, he showed an unprecedented look of despair. He looked back at himself one last time and said, "Remember, your goal is not to serve the goddess of death. Your only task is to maintain the balance. Not only the balance between the goddess of death and the Death Knight, but also the balance between the Death Knight and the goddess of death. Because once the goddess of death loses her balance, her instincts will make her destroy all life in the universe. If death is too powerful, life will no longer exist." After saying that, the other universe's Thanos fell into death. Thanos was still shocked and pained by the death of all living things that he had seen. He opened his eyes and saw a galaxy of prosperity and life growing, as well as the essence of death. He sat on the throne-like flying device, silently watching everything. He had never loved this universe and these living things more than ever before. But he had no choice but to destroy everything he loved with his own hands. In order to save the universe, Thanos decided to become a butcher, destroying half of the lives in the universe. Muhu suddenly felt an incomparably heavy and oppressive feeling in his heart. He knew that in this vicinity, only Slayer Tyrant could give him such a heavy and almost unbearable pressure. He hurriedly came before Slayer Tyrant and knelt down. "Father, why are you so sorrowful?" Thanos found it hard to speak. Wumuhu raised his head to look, but in Slayer Tyrant's eyes, he saw an unspeakable death. He could barely breathe, and his life was about to leave him. Just as Wumuhu was about to die, Slayer Tyrant closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Wumuhu, let me be alone for a while." Wumuhu wisely retreated and cleared the starry sky where Thanos was. Chapter 1009. Thanos' army, which almost ruled the Milky Way, was gathered. In fact, it wasn't easy. Although Thanos' forces were huge, their rulers were the 5 adopted sons of Thanos, who were known as the 5 Generals of Black Radiance. They were Wu-Muhu, Deathblade, Alpha Nebula, Supergiant, and Black Dwarf. But to rule such a huge star field, they needed to suppress endless resistance. And since a few years ago, the Caritas Star, a warring race that followed Thanos, tried to invade Earth. In the end, the power of the Tesseract connected to a terrifying universe. Then, the invaders who destroyed Caritas Star were constantly challenging the order of the universe built by Thanos. Thanos' army fought back, or rather retreated. Thinking of this, Wu-Muhu couldn't help but touch the right side of his face. There was a scar that almost tore his skull apart. That was a souvenir left to him by a very powerful Black Star trooper whose body had been modified. In that battle, if he hadn't run fast enough, the terrifying man known as the Commissar would have killed him. To this day, he thought of those terrifying warriors. Those Black Star troopers gathered under a group called the Soviets. On the front lines of war, those Black Star troopers often took on commando missions, cooperating with the other 2 terrifying armies with different styles. This was because the European community was generally responsible for space fleet battles and protection missions. The Republic was responsible for targeted elimination and planetary defense operations. Therefore, Wu-Muhu hadn't directly come into contact with the warriors of the other 2 forces. Just the Soviet Black Star troopers alone gave all the 5 generals of Black Radiance a nightmarish feeling. Because the Soviet Black Star troopers took on commando and planetary landing missions, there were 3 main methods of combat. The most common and most efficient method was called orbital assault. This method was called Death from the Sky by Thanos' army that was lucky enough to survive. Accompanied by violent orbital positron bombardment, high-energy lasers, nuclear missiles, and vacuum implosion bombs, the Black Star troopers carried amphibious mecha, or landed directly in landing pods, using overwhelming violence to destroy the enemy's command center. The almost fatal wound on Wu-Muhu's face was left by the Soviet Commissar during an orbital assault. If the conditions allowed it, the European Union's battleships would gain an advantage in close combat, or they would gain access to the Chinese space system's resources. Then the Black Star troopers would become the enemy's nightmare. The Terror robots would rush in like a tidal wave, and the Black Star troopers would use armored assault tactics. With the powerful heavy degenerate mechs and other light mechs as the spearhead of the assault, with floating cannons and assault ships providing cover on both sides, they would open up a gap in the enemy's defense line in one fell swoop, and then carry out a centripetal assault to attack the enemy's central vital point. As for the specific situation, Wu-Muhu didn't have enough information to make a judgment, because all the enemies had been killed. After the Black Star troopers, Black Star troopers, Army, and Black Dragons, Dragon, troopers, you god, and you had long ago Black Air's way. After experiencing a series of battles with the Human Revolutionary Alliance, Wu-Muhu's budding ambition was quietly hidden. He had no choice but to rely more on his adoptive father, because he found that after leaving Thanos, there were too many dangers in the universe. There were too many terrifying races and civilizations that were insanely powerful in war, especially the 3 members of the UPA. The leader of the 5 Obsidian Generals, General Deathblade, waited impatiently for Thanos to summon him. Wu-Muhu understood his restlessness because the blade that contained his soul had been broken by the Republic of Black Star troopers in a previous defeat. This had almost killed Deathblade. If it wasn't for Thanos reforging his blade and reviving him, the 5 Obsidian Generals would have become the 4 Obsidian Generals. After such a painful defeat, Deathblade had fallen into the fear that Thanos might think he was useless. In Thanos' logic, an incompetent subordinate had no value at all. The remaining 3 were Proxima Nocturne, Supergiant, and Black Dwarf. In fact, Wu-Muhu was surprised that the 5 Obsidian Generals were still alive. Although this might have something to do with the fact that the son of the Thanatos army had become fearful of the enemy after their initial defeat, they would collapse at the slightest touch. After all, a war maniac like Soviets who would burn glass on a planet or purge an entire planet was too terrifying. But the fact that they were still alive was enough to prove that they all had some skills. After receiving Thanos' signal, the 5 Obsidian generals walked into the command center of the huge battleship. Thanos was still sitting on the throne, leaning tiredly against the throne and closing his eyes. When Thanos sensed them kneeling before his throne, he didn't open his eyes. After all, he might accidentally kill them. Although they were trash, they were the only ones he could use. In the recent war, your performance simply failed to live up to my expectations of you, and failed to live up to the name of the son of Thanos. I really want to send you all back to the furnace to be reforged. Thanos' calm voice didn't contain any anger, but his words still made the 5 Obsidian generals tremble. After all, when Thanos said to be sent back to the furnace to be reforged, it might be literal. After all, their other sister, Nebula, was still fresh in their minds after disappointing Thanos. Unfortunately, I have more important things that I need you all to do now. If you still fail this time, I won't give you a second chance. Thanos said calmly. After seeing the Revolutionary Alliance in the parallel universe, he didn't have any more expectations for his incompetent subordinates. After all, that was a great civilization that could resist the darkness until the universe was almost destroyed. Wumuhu and the rest of the 5 Obsidian generals lowered their heads in fear, expressing their allegiance to their master. Thanos opened his right hand, and a beautiful illusion of a universe appeared on his palm. 6 colors, red, purple, yellow, orange, blue, and green, were gorgeous and colorful, intersecting with each other and finally converging into 6 strangely shaped primordial stones. Thanos said softly, "In the Big Bang, 6 aberrations were left behind. They retained the strangest matter in the universe, and they were called primordial stones. Later, the primordial stones were developed into weapons and polished into infinity stones. Then, those inconspicuous mortals, afraid of the power of the infinity stones, built different shells for them, turning them into their weapons. Now, I know the secret of the 6 infinity stones, and I want to use them to complete a great mission, to destroy the extra half of life in the universe in order to maintain the terrifying balance in the dark, to avoid the imbalance between the unknown death and the known death," Thanos said lightly. "Compared to the great cause of saving the universe, your previous failures are insignificant. But you must be clear, there won't be a second chance. I see 6 primordial stones. They are gathered on the same planet. But that planet is very tricky. It is under the protection of Asgard, and it was once a forbidden place for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It hides many terrible secrets. I have a hunch that this mission may be very tricky," Thanos said calmly. "But the survival of the universe is not just a matter of me alone, so I need help." Thanos said coldly, "In those universes, I will personally persuade the really smart people to help me. But those ignorant ants need you to help them recognize reality. Wumuhu, this time, they need your wisdom." Wumuhu bowed deeply and said, "Father, it is my honor to be able to serve you." Slayer Tyrant opened his eyes, his ash-gray pupils staring at Ebony Throat. That suffocating terror once again appeared on Ebony Throat's body. He stood stiffly in front of Slayer Tyrant, no longer able to breathe. The shadow of death had clearly descended upon his consciousness. In his telepathy, countless indescribable knowledge had almost drowned him. After a few breaths of time, Thanos closed his eyes. Wumuhu collapsed to the ground, feeling extreme pain for the terrible knowledge in his mind. And this was only the most insignificant part of the pain that Thanos had suffered. Thanos had only allowed him to glimpse a corner of the terrifying balance of known death and unknown death. In Wumuhu's eyes, the points and lines of death of all things had already appeared. Go find those people and races who are unwilling to die with the universe. They will be on our side, Thanos said slowly. Wumuhu trembled all over and said in fear, "As you wish, my master." Thanos tapped his fingers lightly and followed the power of death to the ruins of a planet. The wreckage of life and the ruins of civilization made this once prosperous planet so deathly still. Thanos looked at all this, as if he had returned to the day when the Titans were destroyed. At this time, an unimaginable will quietly awakened. He looked at Thanos and said, "Thanos, son of the Titans, why have you come to see me? I see the power of death in you. Could it be that you have already thrown yourself into death? Planet Devourer, great God." Thanos spread his arms and said, "You should have already felt that the crisis of the universe is approaching. The balance is about to be broken, and the fate of the universe is close at hand." Swallowing Star thought quietly for a long time before saying, "But I have my mission, Thanos. I am equally important as death. I must maintain my own existence so that the matter of the universe can be in balance. For this, I have to cherish my own power. I can't help you, Thanos. I know. After all, the balance of death is very important. The Devourer and the balance of war are equally important." Thanos said, "I understand why you want to destroy those planets with life. Because your responsibility is far more important than the destruction of a mere planet. I understand you. I understand you better than anyone else, Planet Devourer. Because I have to make a decision like you." Swallowing Star fell silent. After a long time, he sighed and said, "I will let Tyrant, Flame Emperor, and Silver Shadow help you. Stardust needs to be by my side. After all, this universe is not far from darkness." Chapter 10:10. Thanos. Ares was not surprised. Instead, he calmly looked at the newcomer and said, "You are not admiring the failure of your son of Thanos' army from your throne. How dare you come to Mount Olympus?" Thanos smiled and said, "In this magnificent palace, Olympus has everything that mortals want. Ares, as a god, why are you so dissatisfied? Zeus had no choice but to ground you in this splendid palace. What exactly is it that makes everything here so unattractive to you that you would rather hang out with mortals?" Ares sneered. "Thanos, you didn't come here just to tell me this, did you?" Thanos said, "I'm just pointing out a fact. War. Ares, you are longing for war and killing. You are a god of war, but Zeus grounded you in this boring place. You should belong on the battlefield, like Thor of Asgard." Thor. Ares' face was gloomy. He said with jealousy, "Odin favors him so much, and my father will only trap me here." Thanos sighed. "I brought you war. Zeus will never allow me." Ares stood up angrily. Thanos interrupted him. "My coming here has already shown Zeus's attitude. You know, without his tacit approval, I can't be here. This time, my target is the Midgard of the Nine Worlds, Midgard. Ares, you are free." Ares smiled. He looked at Thanos, revealing his sharp teeth. "Has our king gone mad? He has always forbidden me from provoking those false gods of Asgard. That lecherous old man is afraid of that crazy woman Hela." Ares recalled the past and sighed. "The Nine Worlds, that was our homeland. Back then, your Titan race was the most powerful. Olympus, Vanir, Nine Pillars, and Asgard ruled the solar system together with humans, elves, dwarves, and giants. At that time, the Nine Worlds were called the Nine Worlds, and the Titans were the well-deserved rulers of the Nine Worlds. However, when the Titans were at their strongest, the apocalypse destroyed everything. Only you, the last Titan, were left to hide in the universe, not daring to take a single step into the Nine Worlds. Then, under the leadership of that crazy woman, Odin and Hela, the Asgard gods expelled the Dark Elves, suppressed the elves and dwarves, and started a war with the giants. At the same time, they exiled us and the Nine Pillar gods and merged with the Vanir gods to become the Asgardians. From then on, Odin became the ruler of the Nine Worlds, replacing the divine authority of the Titans. It's a pity that I wasn't born in that era." Ares licked his lips and said excitedly. Thanos smiled and said, "But when Asgard's theocracy declined, Olympus had quietly grown stronger. When Odin started the war, Olympus was still the king of gods, the king of the sea, and the king of Hades. Among the new 12 gods, only Apollo was still young. But now, with you, Athena, even Hercules, Olympus is full of talent. Odin, on the other hand, was already old, and Thor couldn't handle it alone. At that time, Hela, the goddess of death, was feared by Odin and imprisoned in Asgard. Asgard's theocracy has long been unstable. Ares raised his battle axe and revealed a bloody and ferocious smile. Then, as you wish, I will join this war. But Thanos, the condition is that you help me challenge Asgard's theocracy. Thanos said calmly, I will, and I have good news for you. Hela, who was imprisoned by Odin, may not be willing to be lonely. Perhaps the twilight of the gods of Asgard in the prophecy is coming. Asgard has long been destined to be my enemy. Thanos smiled cruelly. Your help may not be enough. I still have to convince a few helpers. Ares said disdainfully, Odin is old. Only Thor is left. Are you looking down on my strength? Thor can't be underestimated, and the Midgardians also have some extraordinary people. What's more, the 9 worlds still have something like the apocalypse. It's not that simple to get the 6 infinity stones that have fallen in the 9 worlds and launch a war that will sweep the universe, Thanos said. Pick him up. Who are you going to find? Ares walked out of the temple of the gods of war and laughed presumptuously when he found that Zeus really didn't stop him. Thanos calmly popped out a name, Mephisto. That old demon full of sulfur? Ares said contemptuously. He's a schemer who only knows how to plot behind the scenes. Mephisto, as the contractor between demons and mages, was a demon that lured humans to fall. He was famous for many of his works, all of which lured the souls of fallen humans. Among them, the most famous was the contractor known as Ghost Rider. He used to be the god of mages, and in the world of mages, the European magic world represented by the London Sanctum had long relied on the power of the contract, until the supreme mage Ancient One formed a trinity of Argonaut, Hogos, and Ohit called Wulshendi, and established a new magic system. The European mages, who no longer had to sell their souls, quickly abandoned Mephisto. This was also one of the few times this great demon failed in the human world, so it desired the soul of the Ancient One. When Mephisto appeared in front of Thanos, it was not a terrifying demon, but a middle-aged man with a thin body, a slightly hunched back, and a hooked nose, with a mocking smile on his face. I know you're trying to maintain the great balance, Mephisto praised. You're a sacrifice, Thanos, but I won't help you for nothing. Mephisto pondered for a moment. I want the soul of the Ancient One. Thanos did not hesitate to betray this powerful mage he had heard of. He said readily, No problem. As long as the Eye of Argonaut falls into my hands smoothly, your wish will be fulfilled. I will lend you a hand when the time is right. Mephisto was cynical and tempting, but he did not lose his calm, deep, and harmonious wit. At least when Thanos was exchanging terms with him, it was very easy. Demons were always like this. Before signing a contract, they could always make you calm and relaxed, but when it came to executing the contract, it was another matter. As Mephisto said himself, I am the spirit of eternal negation. Everything, as long as it is born, will naturally be destroyed, so it is better for nothing to happen. You call this destruction and crime. To put it simply, it's evil. This is my intrinsic nature. There are not many people Thanos wanted to contact next. After obtaining the promise of the Lord of Chaos and the King of Order, he opened a passage to the Dark Plane, where he met his third ally, Dormammu. Dormammu, who was greedy for the earth, did not hesitate to agree to Thanos' request to form an alliance. With the tacit approval of Zeus, the Olympian king, Ares, Mephisto, Dormammu, and the help of the 3 emissaries under Swallower Star, a destructive alliance against the 9 worlds was formally formed. They each had their own interests. Olympus wanted to recapture the divine authority of the 9 worlds. Swallower Star and Thanos wanted to maintain the balance. Dormammu wanted to get the Earth, and Mephisto wanted to maintain the balance in the underworld, and at the same time, get the soul of the Ancient One that it had been plotting for a long time. Chapter 10:11. The majestic Kunlun Mountain was located in the West Pole. It was covered in silver all year round and was surrounded by clouds and mist. At the foot of the Jade Void Peak, in the middle of the small town, there was a clear spring that never froze. It was like a blooming lianhua, blooming on the north bank of Kunlun Mountain. It was also like a silent jade falling into a clear pool, and then rushing towards the surging Kunlun River. Danny was lying in the spring. The bone-chilling cold sealed his body. It was the glacial current of Kunlun Mountain that never melted for tens of thousands of years. It flowed down along the Dragon Vein and settled here, turning into the mouth of the spring. Therefore, Kunlun Spring was usually normal. But if someone used extreme yang inner force as a guide, it would trigger the germination of the Dragon Vein Qi, turning this spring into a heavenly lake of extreme cold. The ancient cold current of Kunlun froze everything and turned those who entered into it into ice sculptures. Only in this way could the potential of extreme yang inner force be forced to reach the highest state of Kunlun martial arts, the pure yang limitless. 9 out of 10 Kunlun disciples who used this method to seal themselves would become nameless ice sculptures under the Kunlun Glacier. 3 old men in Taoist robes with strange appearances and long white hair stood beside the Kunlun spring, staring at the outsider with a high nose and deep eye sockets in the heavenly lake of extreme cold. They were the 3 experts in charge of teaching martial arts in Kunlun, the 3 elders of Kunlun. Of the 3 elders of Kunlun, the shorter one with a goatee stroked his beard and sighed. Danny has been sealed in ice for 9 days. The longest that the Iron Fist of Kunlun has lasted was 13 days. Looks like he can't break out of it and inherit the title of Iron Fist of Kunlun. Under the 10,000 years old glacier, there will be another nameless cold skeleton. Danny is not an ordinary person. His father is the descendant of Kunlun and is only a step away from inheriting the Iron Fist. He has 60 years of pure yang inner force in his body that his father gave him at the risk of his life. Although he can't break out of it, it can protect his internal organs. His chances of breaking out of it are several times higher than ordinary people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have chosen him to inherit the title of Iron Fist. The long-bearded, white-haired Taoist priest of the 3 pure ones had a pair of long eyebrows that hung down to his chin. He was already more than 400 years old, but his face was still ruddy, like a middle-aged man who had taken good care of himself. His eyes were as clear as a baby's, and it was obvious that he possessed a top-notch Taoist inner force. Another Taoist with a full beard shook his head and sighed. Our Kunlun sect has been located in the west for generations, far away from the orthodox land of the Central Plains. Even though our core descendants are the descendants of Yin Han, who came from afar, we have no choice but to compromise with the local forces and accept some outsiders as our protectors. But even so, the Kunlun Iron Fist has always been a Chinese orthodoxy. Why did you choose a Western barbarian this time? As he spoke, he frowned and shook his head. Obviously, he was extremely dissatisfied. The old man with the 3 pure ones smiled and said, "Junior Marshal Brother, you don't have to be so petty. The 1,000-year devil calamity is coming, and we, Kunlun, have long predicted that this devil calamity will be the cruelest and most terrifying one in history. It will engulf the world, and even our Middle Earth will have to unite the 4 barbarians. Accepting a Western continent disciple will also help us communicate with the 4 barbarians so that we can deal with this disaster together. Sect Master has his own plans. Junior Marshal Brother should not speak carelessly." The old man with the full beard sighed helplessly and said ruefully, "The devil calamity is so cruel." The other old man with the goatee said in a deep voice, "Sect Master has determined that this person will wake up today, so he told us to send him out of the country and back to his hometown in Western Continent to prepare for the upcoming world-shocking devil calamity. He also told us to hand over the remains of the divine weapon to him." The remains of the divine weapon. The old man with the full beard slapped the table and stood up. "How do I not know about this? The divine weapon is related to the fate of Middle-earth. How can it be handed over to an outsider?" "Junior Marshal Brother," the old man with the 3 pure ones said with dissatisfaction, "Danny is a member of Kunlun, not an outsider." But the old man with the full beard wanted to say something, but was stopped by the old man with the goatee. "It is not the 2 divine weapons of our Kunlun sect, but the one favored by the fate of the 4 barbarians." The old man with the full beard said in realization, "So that's how it is." Now that the four barbarians have entered Huaxia, the fate of the country has faintly become one, and the fate of the country has changed greatly. There is another path, and it is no longer hindered by fate. The only thing that is not harmonious is that group of... The old man with the full beard thought of that group of little white hats and couldn't help but show a look of disgust, rather to the Western continent than to those heretics. That divine weapon was originally the orthodoxy of ancient Huaxia. It was scattered into the four barbarians, and, as the orthodoxy of the barbarians entering Xia, it was favored by the barbarians at the border of Middle-earth. In the past, the barbarians who invaded Middle-earth all relied on this weapon. It was regarded as the orthodoxy of the four barbarians entering Middle-earth. It was the holy king of ancient times who watched the rise and fall of Middle-earth and had no choice but to do so. Back then, in the hands of that Temujin, it was even more. The old man was heartbroken and said with disgust, "There is no harm in giving up such an inauspicious weapon." The old man with the three pure ones sighed and said, "Throughout the ages, this weapon is both good and evil. When one enters the demonic path, the good will not prevail over the evil. The divine weapon is made by the demonic blade, and it sets off the demonic calamity. As a result, the recasting of this divine weapon is called the small demonic calamity that occurs once every 300 years. It is the Sirius star transformation, the sign of the rebellion in China. Now that the headmaster has abandoned it in the Western continent, presumably the old land of the Western continent will be in turmoil." The old man with the full beard couldn't help but laugh proudly. Just as the three elders of Kunlun were observing the great changes in the world, someone behind them said impatiently, "Gentlemen, the agreed time is coming soon. When are you coming out? The scenic spot has been closed for 9 days, and the tourists have a lot of opinions. Our scenic spot management office is also under a lot of pressure." A middle-aged man in security uniform, holding a thermos cup, urged. The three elders of Kunlun helplessly turned around and said, "Government, can you give us a little more time? This concerns the rise and fall of Middle-earth, and the opportunity for the divine weapon to be born." "What fate? We don't care about this." The big cap man covered the thermos cup, held it in his hand, and said, "This Kunlun spring is the property of the people of the country, and it has been lent to you for 9 days. Where are the divine weapons and devil blades? According to the heritage law of the People's Republic of China, it belongs to the material cultural heritage of Kunlun, and you are the owners. As long as it is legal, you can do whatever you want with it. But the country's Kunlun spring cannot be abused by you. Moreover, the 10 divine weapons and 10 devil blades have been classified as first-class cultural relics and are prohibited from leaving the country. Do you know that? Of course, considering the objective requirements of the apocalypse and the rule that the divine weapons and devil blades cannot be recast as blood sacrifices in the country has granted you special permission to send these precious cultural relics out of the country. But they must not fall into your hands. You must remember this." The three elders of Kunlun nodded like they were pounding garlic and said in unison, "Kunlun will never let the divine weapons and devil blades fall into the hands of outsiders." The big cap man took a sip of his wolfberry tea and continued, "Also, the matter of the Kunlun spring. Hurry up, the tourists have come from afar. Once they see that the core of the scenic area is closed for maintenance, they will have a lot of opinions. Now is not the past. We can't fool them with their opinions and requests. Now, the Kunlun Cold Spring, ancient dragon vein, has become an important tourist attraction, and the Frozen Spring Experience project is very popular. Look at the human thawing center we have just built, molecular thawing, and the investment is huge. Also, the glacial bones you sent over have been successfully thawed after expert consultation. Those old antiques are causing a lot of trouble. When are you going to take them back?" The three elders of Kunlun said helplessly, "Those seniors are all older than us, even my grandmaster. We are also helpless. Recently, the sect leader is preparing for the Kunlun Grand Tournament of the strongest in history, hoping to make those seniors a little more obedient. Then hurry up. The big cat man was also very worried. We also hope to be more respectful to those ancient people, but they quarrel every day, saying that they are hawks and dogs of the imperial court, and that they want to compete in swordsmanship when they have great martial arts, which is not conducive to harmony. All of them disdain to be associated with the imperial court, and our government is also very troubled. It is too difficult to change the minds of those old antiques. If you still don't take them back, we will have to use weapon-grade cognitive interference equipment. At that time, they will all complain about broken Taoist heart and brainwashing by demonic arts. I want to see how you will deal with them. After saying that, the big cat man gave them a deadline, left the three elders of Kunlun who had a worried expression, and left leisurely. The three elders of Kunlun also did not have the mood to talk about the world, and all of them squatted beside the heavenly cold spring, hoping that the people inside would come out as soon as possible, sighing and reminiscing the past when the government was not so tyrannical. They reminisced the days when the Divine Spear Bureau was still around and the smooth channels of communication with the country. At that time, they could still see the king of hell. Unlike now, the little devils were all very difficult to deal with. What a bureaucratic style. The three elders of Kunlun sighed. Just as the last ray of sunlight shone on the cold spring, the person sealed in the cold spring finally moved. A powerful extreme yang inner force wrapped around Danny's body, and the inner force rushed out of his meridians. Under the restraint of the extremely cold dragon vein, it turned into a surging tide in Danny's body. The strong pressure of the cold dragon vein finally forced the inner force and the pure yang inner force entrenched in his internal organs into a desperate situation. A bit of the extremely cold dragon marrow turned into extreme yang, and yin and yang mixed into one, and pure yang was born. Finally, the inner force turned into true qi, and it flowed through Danny's limbs and bones. The true qi flowed through his skin, flesh, tendons, and bones, and shattered the cold ice. The cold spring of Kunlun splashed and turned into black ice, shooting in all directions. The three elders of Kunlun were caught off guard, and the black ice that was as sharp as a well-tempered alloy pierced towards them like all daggers. They could only wave their sleeves, and pure, true qi formed a wall, blocking these flying hidden weapons. However, some of the black ice that escaped the net still shattered the stone pavilion that covered the Kunlun spring into pieces. The big cat man was leisurely drinking tea in the distance. Looking at this scene, a black ice all happened to shoot towards him. The big cat man's eyes narrowed, and in the vacuum flask in his hand, countless space bubbles stacked on top of each other. The energy quantum quietly stimulated the water vapor floating above the vacuum flask, and a high-energy laser shot out, landing on the eyesol. In an instant, it evaporated into water vapor. Chapter 10:12. Danny opened his eyes and said, "Disciple did not disappoint the three elders. I have already cultivated the supreme heart technique of Kunlun." The three elders of Kunlun only thought in their hearts, "What supreme heart technique? It is purely a lie. Was passed on to outsiders. How can there be anything good? It is just an inner strength technique of a protector." Among the three elders of Kunlun, the bearded elder suddenly made a move. His hands were like the beak of a crane. With just a shake, he broke through Danny's protective chi and fiercely pecked his forehead a few times. Danny's hands were like cattail leaf fans. He laid out layers of seals in front of him. Even if it was a sudden rain of bullets, he had the confidence to withstand it. But he just could not avoid the elder's pecks. His head was full of bumps. The elder said angrily, "Brat, what are you showing off? If you break other people's things, our Kunlun will have to pay. Do you know? Can you afford to pay for the things of the government?" I was wrong. Third elder, show mercy. It hurts." Only then did the bearded elder let go of the crane hand. Between his index and middle finger, a few clumps of hair slowly fell, with traces of blood at the roots. After a period of noise, Danny and the three elders of Kunlun all sat in a quiet room. The great elder said slowly, "Danny, you have already passed the final test, and become the 67th Kunlun Iron Fist Protector. Now, Kunlun has nothing to teach you anymore. He handed a plane ticket to Danny, said, I know you have nothing, so I bought you a plane ticket to New York City. Your hometown is in danger. You will carry the remains of the divine weapon and carry out the chivalrous path of Kunlun. Remains of the divine weapon? Danny took the item, but only saw an object that had been melted into an iron rod. He took the item, and his hand sank. The vital energy in his body suddenly started to circulate involuntarily and combined with the mysterious aura of the remains of the divine weapon in his hand. The vital energy formed. The red, pure, young, vital energy turned black and formed the image of a ferocious giant wolf behind him. Seeing this, the three elders of Kunlun showed complicated expressions. The bearded elder said sadly, looking northwest, shooting the heavenly wolf. Danny asked in confusion, Elder, what is a divine weapon, and why is it a wreckage? The three elders of Kunlun sighed and said, Since ancient times, humans have faced endless evil challenges. In the West, there are strong people who are known as heroes protecting this world. Then, in the ancient times, what protected this world? Danny said, Is it Kunlun? The goateed second brother continued, Kunlun is just one of them. Humans were created by an unimaginably evil being. He enlightened the ancestors of the human race on the African continent of today. Although humans were created by him, they were not willing to be enslaved by him. Therefore, throughout the ages, there have been wise and courageous people who resisted his will. Among them, there were two great sages. One of them was in the Central Plains, and the other was in India. They were born at about the same time. They were publicly acknowledged to be supreme sages who could compete with that evil existence in terms of wisdom. One of them was called Daozu, and the other was called Buddha, and that evil existences has always remained in this world. The two wise men created the path to fight against evil, Taoism and Buddhism, and because of this, that evil existence was called a demon. We, Kunlun, are the inheritors of Taoism. During the time when the two wise men were born, it was known as the spring and autumn period. Evil appeared in the world, and the primeval heavenly demon descended. He bewitched the most outstanding thinkers and schools of thought in the Central Plains at that time, the 100 schools of thought. He used the excuse of teaching them the method to fight against demons to forge and recast 10 powerful weapons known as demon blades. The devil's calamity descended. The 100 schools of thought controlled by the demon blades stirred up wars in various countries in that era. At that time, the Tao left behind by the wise man, known as Daozu, was comprehended by people. In order to fight against the demon blades, the wise men among the 100 schools of thought found the weapons of the ancient holy kings. The powerful schools of thought and the 100 schools of thought also forged a few weapons to fight against the demon blades. Unlike the demon blades, which were used to kill and destroy, these weapons were created to protect humans and civilization and to protect the Central Plains. They were called divine weapons. Divine weapons can destroy demon blades, and demon blades can also break divine weapons. They were originally created to destroy each other. However, the demonic nature of the primordial heavenly demon in the demon blades and the Tao nature of Daozu in the divine weapons are eternal and indestructible. Therefore, the destiny of divine weapons and demon blades is to be destroyed by destruction and to be reborn by reforging. When a divine weapon is born, it is mostly a wreckage. It needs to go through a ritual known as reforging before it can shine with infinite power in the hands of a weapon master. It is the same for demon blades. However, the reforging ritual for demon blades is called a blood sacrifice. Danny asked doubtfully, Then, are there no divine weapons that can't be destroyed? There are. The three elders of Kunlun said, but divine weapons and demon blades all have their own weapon masters. Other than the weapon master, no one can use them. Once they leave the weapon master, the divine weapons and demon blades will fall into silence. After thousands of years, they will be no different from stubborn iron. Similarly, They have to go through a ritual before they can recognize a new master and shine again. The ritual for a divine weapon to recognize a master is called relight, while the ritual for a demon blade to recognize a master is called ritual sacrifice. Therefore, all along, during the great calamity of the Central Plains, there have always been masters of divine weapons and demon blades who were born to protect the Central Plains and the world. These are the heroes of the Central Plains. Danny caressed the divine weapon that was like an iron rod in his hand. He was deeply shocked. He raised his head and said, "Masters of divine weapons and demon blades protect the world? Isn't this the conspiracy of the masters of divine weapons to fight against the masters of demon blades to destroy the world?" The three elders of Kunlun smiled bitterly. No one knows what the primordial demon is thinking. Although the masters of demon blades caused the great calamity of the warring states, they are all heroes of the Central Plains. Their mission is to protect the Central Plains. It is just that the power of the demon blades is used to realize their ambitions. Although there are scum who caused the demonic calamity in the past generations, most of the masters of divine weapons will unite with the masters of divine weapons in the face of foreign invaders. Therefore, the heroes of the Central Plains and the masters of divine weapons do not reject the demon blades. Then, what is the name of the divine weapon in my hand? Danny caressed the wreckage of the divine weapon excitedly. He felt the mysterious breath of the divine weapon in his hand. The three elders of Kunlun said leisurely, "The divine weapon in your hand is a divine weapon of the Central Plains that is neither good nor evil. The disasters it causes are sometimes even more terrible than the demon blades. It is the orthodox weapon of the Central Plains, the weapon of the four barbarians. It has many names. Every time it is reforged with blood, it will have a new form and name. According to the tradition of divine weapons and demon blades, the name of the strongest master of weapons is the common name. This is the divine weapon of Temujin, the one that conquered the world, Celestial Wolf Blade. The Celestial Wolf Blade represents the decline of the Han Dynasty and the disaster of war. It is the orthodox symbol of the Yuan and the Qing, the Xiongnu and the Xianbei, the Turks and the Jurchens, Celestial Wolf Blade. During the Republic of China, after the Celestial Wolf Blade was reforged by the Qing dynasty, the last master of weapons, Cixi, tried to use it to defend against foreign enemies. However, she was killed by the Celestial Wolf Blade. After Cixi's death, the Celestial Wolf Blade was destroyed by the master of demon blades, Yuan Shikai, who feared its power. Later, Yuan Shikai was killed by the master of divine weapons, Sun Wen. Sun Wen gave the remains to us of Kunlun for safekeeping. The new Iron Fist Danny was moved. Why did Kunlun give me this divine weapon? The eyes of the three old men were deep. They looked at the land of Middle-earth in the east and sighed helplessly. Because Middle-earth no longer needs the protection of divine weapons and demon blades. Danny's countenance was filled with shock. The three old men sighed. That's right, all the divine weapons and devil blades will be rebuilt outside the borders. The owner of the divine weapons will bring the divine weapons and devil blades to the outside world to protect this world. Danny said in disbelief, "Why is it like this? Could it be?" The eldest of the three old men, the three pure beards, stood up and said, "Of the 10 divine weapons, we of Kunlun have kept 2 for generations. Every time there is a calamity, we will go down the mountain to find the master of weapons." That's right. The reason why Sun Wen gave us the Celestial Wolf Blade was because he was the master of weapons chosen by Kunlun. The Zen ancestral court also kept 2 divine weapons because they brought the teachings of Buddha from India and integrated them into the way of divine weapons. The imperial court also has 2 divine weapons that represent the orthodoxy of the foreign races. The other 3 divine weapons are the teachings of Confucianism, military, and Dharma among the 100 schools of thought. Do you know what the 2 orthodoxy divine weapons of the imperial court are? The 3 old men's hair and beard stood on end. Danny naturally didn't know. The bearded old man said painfully, "It's the 3 sovereign sword and the 5 emperor's blade, the divine weapons of the ancient holy king." They are the strongest divine weapons reforged by Kong Chiu and Gue Gu. The Master of the Path of Kings is the 3 sovereign sword master. The Master of the Path of Hegemony is the 5 Emperor's Blade King. According to the naming rules of divine weapons, they are also called Xianyuan Xiaoyu Sword and Overlord's Crossblade. Back then, we didn't know the right person. The Master of the Divine Weapons was bewitched by the Western continent. He wanted to replace the orthodoxy with the divine weapons of the 3 citizens. He wanted to abolish the emperor and revive the republic. He wanted to abolish the orthodoxy divine weapons so that they couldn't choose another master of weapons. Because the 2 orthodoxy divine weapons will only recognize the founder of the country and the king of hegemony. The bearded old man said slowly. Later, the heavens sent the Sheng Taizu to reforge the divine weapons and devil blades in his hands into the scythe of the common land and the hammer of the people's democracy. With the scythe and hammer as the orthodoxy, Huaxiao regained its glory. In the end, they abandoned the power of the divine weapons and only took his spirit when he reforged the divine weapons. From then on, the Middle-earth government no longer relied on the power of the divine weapons. Since a few years ago, after the change in Huaxia, the government reformed and embarked on a path that Middle-earth had never seen before. The divine weapons and devil blades that protected the divine land in the past are no longer needed by this country. 2 years ago, when we proposed to reforge the divine weapons in the Divine Spear Bureau to deal with the Great Calamity, the government issued a clear order. After the founding of the country, the divine weapons are not allowed to be reforged within the country. Because the reforging of the divine weapons and devil blades requires the unity of heaven, earth, and man. They must work together and work together. The current government will no longer allow this kind of thing that shakes the social order to happen. The 3 old men of Kunlun returned the remains of the heavenly wolf blade to Danny and said, "Therefore, the major guardians have decided to send the divine weapons and devil blades outside the country to protect other humans. Starting from you, the other weapon masters we have chosen will go abroad to reforge the divine weapons and deal with the Great Calamity. Similarly, the devil blades will also be sent abroad through various channels to choose their owners." After Danny was sent down from Kunlun, he held the plane ticket in his hand and waited for the low Earth orbit space shuttle in the newly built airport of Kunlun. He was still in a daze. Carrying the remains of the heavenly wolf blade, he felt dizzy. How did I, a she, become the owner of the divine weapons chosen by Kunlun? At this moment, a young man beside him looked curiously at the plane ticket in his hand and said with a smile, "After the fall of New York, although the American government built a second New York City on the periphery, it was too close to Skynet. Not many people in our country dare to go there. Are you a citizen of the new New York City? Is it still safe there? You know, I'm a little worried about the safety." He stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "I'm Chinong, an insurance investigator sent by the government. I'm responsible for the investigation of the foreign contracts left behind by the domestic insurance companies. After the change, the domestic private ownership was destroyed and the market disappeared. However, the remaining international business and international commercial contracts were left behind for the country to deal with. I'm currently heading to New York to handle the claims of the domestic insurance companies." Danny grasped Chun Ang's hand in realization and explained, "I'm going back to take over my father's company." Danny smiled bitterly and said, "I came to China before the cataclysm happened in New York. This is my first time going back. I heard that the company has moved there, but I'm not familiar with the place at all." "Is that so?" Chinong smiled and said, "You're really lucky." Danny said with realization, "I'd rather not be so lucky. If I could choose again, I'd go through that pain with the people of New York." In the loud whistling sound, the huge low Earth orbit space shuttle slowly approached the ground. In the belly of the ship, a few strange and sci-fi orbiting space shuttles left the spaceship and began to land. Looking at this scene that could only be seen in sci-fi movies, Danny felt very unfamiliar and bitter. Although he had been in this country for more than 10 years, he realized that he still knew nothing about this place. Chapter 10:13. When he arrived at the second, New York City, the aircraft slowly landed. Danny could feel the complicated gazes of the Americans around him as they stared at the strange aircraft. When he left the airport, he met the young man with an Asian face, Chenong. He greeted him in a friendly manner. "Have a safe journey, Mr. Danny." After that, Danny watched him walk out of the airport. Two men in suits greeted him, and a man who looked like a lawyer went up to shake his hand. Danny didn't think much of it. In America, lawyers were just like the police. But when Chenong got into the car to pick him up, Danny's eyes suddenly became serious. Chenong seemed to notice that Danny had been staring at him. Before the car drove away, he nodded slightly to Danny. Danny's relaxed mood suddenly became gloomy. He saw a familiar logo. It was the logo of Harold Milcham Industries, which Danny's father founded with his partners. Danny's father, Wendell, had once found the location of Kunlun when he was young and trained as a protector in Kunlun for a period of time. Later, Wendell left Kunlun and returned to America to become a young and promising entrepreneur. Together with his good friend, Harold Milcham, he founded a company that wasn't called Harold Milcham Industries at the time. Unfortunately, when he went hiking with Harold Milcham, he was killed by Harold, who had a crush on his wife. In the end, only Danny was saved by the archers from Kunlun. Although Danny had been living in Kunlun all these years, he had investigated the whereabouts of his enemy, Harold Milcham. He knew that after this successful businessman returned to New York, he restructured the business partnership with his father and changed its name to Harold Milcham Industries Group. It became bigger and stronger, and during the cataclysm in New York, it took the opportunity to expand, and it had already developed into a rather influential international financial group. But he didn't expect that fate would let him meet the tentacles of this group so soon. Danny thought about the mysterious man he met on the spaceplane. Was it pure coincidence, or was it a faked encounter? He decided to look for Kunlun's hidden forces in America and get their help. Then, he would find a trustworthy law firm to handle his identity documents and inheritance. After that, he would go directly to Harold Milcham Industries to inherit his father's shares. According to his investigation, although Harold Milcham Industries had financed many times, he didn't know if it was because Harold felt guilty or if he had other intentions. He still retained some of his old friend's shares and gave them to the trust. Although it was diluted to a certain extent, Danny would still be a major shareholder of the group after inheriting the inheritance. Kunlun contacted a law firm in Chinatown for him. After proving his identity, Danny paid a large sum of inheritance tax and got back his father's shares. At that moment, he realized that Harold should already be aware of his arrival. The remains of the serious blade on his back seemed to have undergone some strange changes after arriving in New York. Danny could feel that something was quietly reviving on the remains. During his daily training, he could also feel the aura of the serious blade slowly fusing with him. It seemed that after obtaining something from him, this godly weapon was changing something. Danny didn't have the time to study this change. He went to Harold Milcham Industries. "Mr. Danny, do you want to make an appointment with our CEO?" The receptionist politely refused. "But the CEO hasn't made an appointment in the past few months." At that moment, Danny saw the lawyer who went to the airport to pick up Chenong walk down the stairs and said to the receptionist, "Let him in. This is our new shareholder. I'll handle this matter." The lawyer walked over and shook hands with Danny. "Are you Mr. Danny Thomas Rand Kai?" Danny could only nod. "I think it should be me if my Social Security account hasn't been canceled because of my disappearance." The lawyer smiled. "I just received a notification from the trust fund the day before yesterday. Congratulations on coming back from the dead, Mr. Danny." The lawyer didn't say much and went straight to the point. "I have a copy of your will here, Mr. Danny. I hope you can cooperate with me." Danny sneered. "My father didn't make a will. He didn't think he would die." The lawyer seemed a little embarrassed. He pushed up his glasses and said, "It's not your father's will, Mr. Danny." "Oh." This time, Danny was a little surprised. "Is it my mother or my grandfather?" The lawyer looked at Danny with a strange expression. He stammered, "Mr. Danny, you just received the company's shares. You might not have participated in the board meeting. Harold Milcham Industries is not a listed company, which means it doesn't have to be responsible for the public. As a shareholder, you have the right to know about this matter. However, we hope you won't reveal it because it will have a negative impact on the company. Actually, it's Mr. Harold Milcham's will. This time, it was Danny's turn to be in disbelief. His heart felt like it was overturned. Many emotions kept rolling in his mind. For a moment, he was a little dazed. The death of the ascetic cultivator in Kunlun had suddenly caused his hatred to lose its support. His heart was empty, and he didn't know if he was happy or sad. There was even some disbelief. He felt that it might be a plot that Harold had made after knowing that he had returned for revenge. The lawyer led him to the office and handed him a copy of Harold's will. In the will, Danny's father's real estate, his mother's jewelry, and even his family's old mansion were all given to him. There was even a part of the shares of Harold Milcham Industries. Danny was a little stunned as he held the documents. He raised his head and said to the lawyer, "Can I know anything about Harold's death?" The lawyer hesitated and said, "This has been discussed at the board meeting. The relevant information has been reported long ago. If you want it now, there's someone who can help you." So, he led Danny to a small and secluded office. When Danny entered, he saw the mysterious young man he met on the plane again. The lawyer introduced, Harold Milcham's huge insurance was invested in a joint venture insurance company. What's rare is that it's a Sino-American joint venture insurance company. Due to the changes in China, everything in China is handled by the Chinese government. This is an insurance investigator from China. He's in charge of investigating Harold's huge insurance. He then turned to Chinong and introduced, "This is the inheritor of a part of Mr. Harold's shares and the company's major shareholder. He wants to know something about Harold's death." At this time, Chinong was dealing with the relevant surveillance footage. When he saw Danny, he immediately recognized him. "Mr. Danny and I seem to have taken the same flight. Mr. Danny, you're young and promising. President Harold was insured by our company, and he chose a personal accident insurance policy. A month ago, Mr. Harold was found dead in his office. The police determined that it was a homicide. The suspect broke Mr. Harold's neck, but the police couldn't find any suspects. The investigation has reached a stalemate. That's why HQ sent me here to assist in the investigation. According to the relevant circumstances, the suspect is a highly skilled assassin who has received relevant training. The security of Harold Milcham Industries is handled by a self-established security company. I've investigated the security measures of the company. It can be said that it's airtight and impenetrable. With so many elite security personnel and high-tech equipment, it's almost impossible to kill President Harold quietly." Danny doubted. In other words, it's more likely that Harold directed and acted on his own. The lawyer coughed uneasily at the side, but Danny ignored him. Instead, he listened to Chinong say, "It's not impossible, but there's another explanation. There are some people who possess extraordinary abilities. They might be able to do what we think is impossible." Danny's expression was a little ugly. He didn't even know if the man in front of him was hinting at him, but he felt that Chinong seemed to know something. Chinong continued, "So I pulled up the satellite records of Stark Industries and found a suspect. He appeared near Harold Milcham Industries during the time of Mr. Harold's death, and he's also the person who might have killed President Harold." As he spoke, a person's picture was projected on the wall. It was a person wearing a superhero uniform that looked like a knight's suit, but the mask had no eyes. Chinong introduced, "Super Daredevil, a vigilante who appeared near Hell's Kitchen in Old New York City. He was a former superhero. After the cataclysm, he once served justice in New York City under Skynet's control. But 3 years ago, he disappeared during a purge of New York City's criminal organizations involving Skynet. A month ago, he suddenly appeared near Harold Milcham Industries and was discovered by a satellite of Stark Industries." Chinong said indifferently, "Although there's no direct evidence, Super Daredevil is indeed the biggest suspect in the death of President Harold. But the strange thing is, President Harold seemed to know that he would be killed a long time ago. So we can't rule out the possibility that he directed and acted on his own. But I've personally confirmed his death." Danny's expression became strange. He said hesitantly, "Can I go see him in person?" The lawyer said awkwardly, "Mr. Danny, President Harold's body has been handed over to his relatives. We have no right to. Danny didn't say anything more to him. He just turned and left. Chapter 1014. As a qualified investigator, Chun Ong had calmly dealt with the East Ocean continent's property valuation investigation. He had also chatted and laughed with the evil spirit Kayako. He had once gone to the Stanley Hotel by himself, and while surrounded by evil spirits, he had investigated the author Jack Torrance's personal accident insurance. He had personally handed the huge insurance premium to the beneficiary after Fu Jiang died, and after the beneficiary died, he had taken the insurance premium back from Fu Jiang. He was the backbone of the Japanese insurance investigators, and was in charge of large-scale compensation for the balloon accident insurance. After transferring to the North America region, his performance was still outstanding. He investigated the fire accident insurance in Silent Hill Town, the fire accident in Elm Town, and the subsequent large-scale accidental deaths. He had a heart of stone and sent Hannibal, the beneficiary of an accident insurance policy, to a psychiatric hospital on the grounds that he was mentally ill, avoiding the huge compensation from the company. He also sent the terminally ill, lonely old man nicknamed Hardsaw, the mentally handicapped teenager Jason, the beloved clown of Derry, the brave and righteous teenager Hewitt from Texas, the 6-year-old boy Michael from Haydenfield, and the promising teenager Bateman to the hospital. He was a ruthless person for the company's benefit. On Indian Island, 10 little soldiers went out to eat. 1 choked to death, and there were 9 left. 9 little soldiers stayed up late. 1 overslept, and there were 8 left. In the eerie nursery rhyme, Chun Ong had once calmly watched the murderer kill the insured and then hand over the insurance premium to the dying beneficiary. As an investigator, Chun Ang's motto was, "Investigating the truth is an investigator's duty, but calmly watching from the sidelines is a necessary quality. Apart from necessary work, there is no need to intervene in any disputes. Apart from the company's benefit, there should be no conflict of interest with any other parties." Harold Milcham Industries headquarters. A man in black tights and a mask nimbly flipped over the wall and landed on the ground. He knew that Harold's office was on the 23rd floor of a building not far away, but there were surveillance cameras, heat sensors, and gravity sensors everywhere. There were also 6 groups of elite security guards patrolling the place continuously. Harold Milcham Industries was located in a relatively closed industrial zone. Unlike Stark Industries, which had a headquarters in a bustling area, it existed in the form of an industrial park in the suburbs. The place was heavily monitored and the security was tight. He observed for a long time, but he couldn't find a way to sneak in. The mysterious man. No, it was Danny who had snuck into Harold's office in a black suit. Without authorization, almost no one can successfully sneak into Harold's office. Unless he has the blueprints for the headquarters of Harold Milcham Industries. However, this blueprint was not backed up by the government. The blueprint was hidden in the company's archives. You don't need a blueprint to remotely sense the security arrangement of Harold Milcham Industries. It's either a government department, such as S.H.I.L.D., Hydra, they're omnipotent, or Stark Industries, or Skynet. Danny decided to put himself in the perspective of an intruder and do it himself. He spread the true energy cloud all over his body. His spirit spread out along with the true energy, raising it to an inexplicable level of sensitivity. It was as if there was a spider web following his spirit to spread out in all directions, conducting the tiniest of movements. Danny's whole body shot out like the most agile panther. As if he had the help of God, he bypassed all the surveillance cameras in the open and in the dark. Like a black line, he crept toward the headquarters. In his perception, the patrolling security guards were as obvious as a large light bulb, allowing him to easily avoid the patrols. Using the bone-shrinking skill, he squeezed into the air vent that was so narrow that even a child could not pass through. His body was so soft that it was as if he had no bones. He avoided the surveillance cameras in all kinds of impossible ways. Finally, after going through all kinds of hardships, he arrived at the door of Harold's office. Danny put his hand on the doorknob. He exerted his strength to vibrate the internal conductive structure of the door lock and silently opened the door. In the darkness, he saw a dark shadow sitting behind Harold's desk in silence. Shocked, Danny flicked out his hidden weapons. Silver light shot out, but the figure sitting in the chair suddenly turned on the light. Chun-Ong kicked the swivel chair and used the back of the chair to catch all the hidden weapons that Danny shot at him. He quietly listened to Danny's cry of surprise. "It's you." Chun-Ong sat back in the chair and said in a low voice, "Mr. Thomas, calm down." Hearing that he had been recognized, Danny had no choice but to take off his mask and said, "Is it so easy to see through my disguise?" Today, when the skull comparison technology is so mature, such a simple disguise seems to be meaningless. Chun-Ong smiled and said, "Of course, I am the legendary person who can compare the skull with the naked eye. As an insurance investigator, appearing here late at night seems to have violated the law of the United States," Danny said doubtfully. "Then why did you sneak here, Mr. Thomas?" Chun-Ong asked. "Moreover, I have the authorization from the board of directors. They have authorized me to complete the investigation in my own way. As long as there are no laws against it, it is not illegal." Chun-Ong smiled. Danny's tone was gloomy. "Just how much insurance premiums did Harold Milcham pay for you to put in so much effort?" Chun-Ong sighed and said, "It's a VEM agreement. The entire insurance agreement is very complicated. Just the documents alone can fill up the entire room. All you need to know is that if Harold was murdered, the bank and the insurance company could easily collude and take over the company. Unless the truth of his accidental death is found and the inheritance clause is revealed." Chun-Ong suddenly went straight to the point. "Since you were able to successfully sneak in, it means that you have already grasped the killer's crime modus operandi. I was looking at the problem from the killer's point of view. I have solved the mystery, but there is still one piece of the puzzle missing." Danny asked, "Which piece?" Chun-Ong said, "The killer's motive. You should have realized that the killer's ability is extraordinary. Either he has the blueprints of Harold Milcham Industries headquarters, or he has some special means to sense the security arrangements here." "Special means?" Danny's expression changed. "You mean I have that kind of means?" "That's right," Chun-Ong said, "technology or some special ability." A machine eye glowing with blue light appeared on Chun-Ong's palm. Countless tiny blue rays swept across and quickly projected a 3D model of Harold Milcham Industries headquarters on Chun-Ong's palm. Technological methods can use remote sensing, microradiation X-ray, and multi-phase radar scanning. There are not many technologies that can do this, but the political or economic entities that possess these technologies wouldn't care about a mere Harold Milcham industrial group. Moreover, they could have done better. It would have been a piece of cake for them to kill Harold naturally. Moreover, the entire case is filled with reckless individualism. I also obtained more evidence. Chun-Ong raised his hand and tapped on the 3D projection. A red mark marked the route that Danny had taken when he sneaked in. The traces collected in other places are mostly heavily contaminated, but there is one place that is well preserved, and that is the ventilation duct. Under normal circumstances, no living thing can sneak into the ventilation duct. But I have collected some pheromones and organic substances that are unique to the human body. In other words, not long ago, someone sneaked in through the ventilation duct just like you did. Impossible. Danny refused to believe it. Chun-Ong laughed. "Do you think that your method of sneaking in is irreplaceable? Is it the way you avoided surveillance and detectors, or the way you passed through the narrow ventilation duct? Other than your superb bone-shrinking skills, there are many other ways for people to pass through the ventilation duct. For example, the Ant-Man. In fact, he is very suspicious, but unfortunately, the Ant-Man will not leave traces like pheromones. It must have been a burly man in tight clothes like you, who was panting and rubbing his body against the ventilation duct hole bit by bit in order to get in." Chun-Ong mentioned another method that Danny thought was impossible. As for avoiding surveillance, it is not difficult. In addition to rich experience as a special agent, you can also rely on your keen spirit and senses. Mr. Thomas should understand that after training, some people can keenly sense other people's gazes. In fact, this ability is very close to the superhuman perception that Mr. Thomas has demonstrated. But you forget that this ability can appear in another kind of person besides special training in martial arts. Danny's eyes narrowed. What kind of person? A blind person, especially a blind person who has received special training. Moreover, a blind person who has received training from an Eastern ninja master. In fact, entering places that ordinary people cannot enter is one of the most important training for ninjas. I can easily recognize this unique way of doing things. Therefore, I have been closing my eyes and sneaking in here. I want to reenact the case. Now I have finally confirmed it. The murderer is blind and has received special training. It's very likely that it's a ninja's infiltration training, and his physical fitness is very amazing. There aren't many people who fit these characteristics, and he coincidentally overlaps with the suspect we already have. Danny said in a cold voice, "Super Daredevil." Chunong stood in front of Harold's desk, and the scene that happened that night slowly replayed in his mind. Super Daredevil stood in front of this desk, facing a calm Harold. Harold calmly conversed with him for a few words, and then Super Daredevil took something from Harold's body. Then, he lost control and killed Harold. Chapter 10:15. How are you going to find clues about Daredevil? Danny asked in a low voice. But Chunong said, I'm not going to find clues about a superhero's identity. I'm just waiting for the clues to find me. Chunong's words almost made Danny laugh. He said coldly, So, you're going to try your luck? Can I ask a question? Chunong gestured to him. Up to you, but I might not answer, Danny said coldly. Chunong asked calmly, What does Harold have to do with you? What does it have to do with you how I investigate him? What reason and position do you have to ask me how I investigate him? Danny fell into a deep silence. After a long time, he raised his head and said, He should have died by my hands. I learned an extraordinary karmic skill just to come back and take his head. But he died by someone else's hands. It's not fair to me. So I just want to seek justice. For my mother and for my father. Chunong laughed and said, It's another cliché revenge story. So who said that the clues won't come to me? You see, haven't you already come to me? Suspect number 2, you have the ability to kill Harold, and you have the ability to do all this. You even showed me how to commit the crime. Compared to Daredevil, you have an additional motive to kill. Danny sneered and said, Yes, if I were in a different position, I would also think that I'm the biggest suspect. Chunong did not seem to understand the sarcasm in Danny's words. Instead, he explained, Daredevil has many friends with extraordinary skills. So, it will be very difficult to find out his true identity. But as I said, even if you don't look for clues, clues will come to you. Yesterday, I released the news that Daredevil is the first suspect in this case. Do you think his friends will be able to restrain themselves? So, Danny's face darkened. Chunong pulled the chair back, turned around, and sat down. Leaning against the backrest, he said in a low voice, That's why I came here late at night to investigate. Not only to look for clues and evidence of the crime, but also to wait for those who carry the key clues to bring them to me. Mr. Danny, you're a surprise, but I have a feeling that you won't be the only surprise tonight. Danny also leaned against the desk. He thought about it carefully and understood what Chunong meant. Then I'll have to wait and see with you. Time ticked away bit by bit. The two of them sat in silence in Harold's office. Chunong turned around and turned off the lights to prevent the security personnel from coming up to investigate. As the hands of the clock on the wall pointed to the most fatigued period of the human body, a slight noise immediately woke Danny up. There was a slight rustling sound coming from the ventilation pipe, but soon stopped. Finally, at a place far away from where Danny had snuck in, the soft sound of prying open the air vent could be clearly heard in the quiet building all the way to the office where they were. That person did not pass through the narrowest part of the ventilation pipe, so he still had to go through 5 or 6 security checks before he could enter their current location. But this time, Danny was already very vigilant. He lowered his voice, and together with Chunong, they were like two ghosts in the night. Those few difficult security checks failed to stop that person. He had already snuck into the vicinity of Harold's office. At this time, Danny finally understood what Chunong had felt before. He sensed that the person was cautiously approaching here, but he was calmly watching from the side, waiting for the person to push the door open and then be startled. This feeling, what should I say? Not bad. When that person's thick palm silently absorbed the sound of the switch, a sturdy black shadow flashed past and entered Harold's office. In the darkness, Danny could even see the whites of two conspicuous eyeballs. Other than that, it was all camouflage. Obviously, that person was also shocked by the two silent black shadows waiting for him. He suddenly stiffened for a moment, then lowered his voice and said, "You were waiting for me?" In the darkness, two sets of snow-white teeth were particularly conspicuous. Chenong turned on the lights, and what appeared in front of Danny was a sturdy black man. His movements were light, and he was clearly calmer than Danny. After seeing Chun-Ang's face clearly, the black man heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed. Chun-Ang chuckled and said, "So in addition to extremely keen perception, wearing camouflage can also avoid surveillance." The black man showed his white teeth and said, "Hey, man, you are suspected of racial discrimination." Luke Cage, a friend of Super Daredevil, used to be a gang member in Harlem. Later, after entering prison, he accepted the human enhancement experiment of Pioneer Technology AIM and had amazing physical fitness. After being released from prison, he changed his ways and worked as a cleaner in Henry Hunter's barbershop. Later, he was involved in a gang dispute, and Henry Hunter died. In the end, he chose to fight crime as a vigilante. Because of this, he became a friend of Super Daredevil. Chenong said calmly, "Super Daredevil has a lot of friends. You also have Jessica Jones, the Punisher, and Spider-Man. I thought the person who came would be that little spider." Luke Cage looked up and down at Chenong and said in a deep voice, "You are the insurance investigator? It seems that you have been waiting for me for a long time." Chun-Ong shrugged indifferently and said, "It didn't exceed my patience, and by the way, this unexpected harvest came." Then he gestured to Danny next to Luke. Luke turned to look at Danny and said, "Who are you?" Chun-Ong explained on his behalf, "An Avenger. Your partner's actions obviously hindered the Count of Monte Cristo's revenge. He has been waiting for a long time. As far as I am concerned, interrupting someone's revenge is second only to the provocation of sleeping with someone's mother." Chen-Ang's words were meaningful. "Why not his girlfriend?" Danny said with dissatisfaction. Chen-Ong laughed and said, "This is the United States. Sister, you see, what's the big deal about sleeping with someone else's girlfriend? This is the chaotic social interaction of teenagers. Stark slept with Black Widow, and then Black Widow fell in love with Hulk. Even if Captain America was involved, what's the big deal? This is the daily life of a superhero. So, he has a grudge against Harold?" Luke frowned. Chen-Ong curled his lips and said in a low voice, "It is the latter type I am talking about, a hatred that covers the sky." Danny's eyebrows jumped in anger. Before he could ask what Chen-Ong was hinting at, he heard Chen-Ong say, "In any case, it doesn't matter if it is hatred or something else. Your partner's actions have clearly caused this Avenger to be very unhappy. And I also need a truth, a relatively true truth, to end my investigation. So, can you call Daredevil over and we can have a good talk? I have no interest in arresting him. This is the business of the U.S. government or the police. I just want a relatively true truth. I don't even want the truth to come to light." Luke Cage was silent for a moment before saying in a muffled voice, "I have lost contact with him for some time now. It's not just me, even the Punisher. Ever since he dealt with a case known as the Sin Coliseum in New York 2 years ago, he's had problems with his mental state. He gradually lost sleep because whenever he closed his eyes, he would have some strange nightmares that he couldn't understand. We have been helping him move on from that past, but he struggled until 3 months ago. Spider-Man told me that when Stark analyzed his mental feedback, he had been hiding it from us. He began to follow the guidance of those nightmares in an attempt to find the source of the nightmares. His mental state may also have a major problem. It was only then that we realized that we could no longer contact him. We have lost contact with Daredevil for 3 months. A few days ago was the first time he appeared in the satellite surveillance. Trust me, I want to figure out what happened more than you do." Chapter 10:16. After asking the questions, Chen-Ong said to Luke, "I hope we can talk in private later." Right now, we have a common interest, and that is to find Daredevil. So, maybe we can exchange information. Also, I want to talk to the people behind you." Luke nodded silently. At this time, Danny suddenly interrupted. "I hope we can talk in private now, so?" He made an apologetic expression to Chun Ong. Chun Ong nodded understandingly and said with a smile, "Then I'll go out for a smoke." After saying that, he pushed the door open and left. Danny's sharp perception had been observing Chun Ang's aura, but he saw Chun Ong walk out as if there was no one there. The surveillance equipment seemed to have completely ignored him. Chun Ang's aura disappeared after he walked down the stairs. At this time, Luke suddenly said, "I thought the two of you were in cahoots." Danny turned around and said, "No, maybe we should be more honest. Although we have not met before, I have heard of the Punisher, and I am willing to trust him." Danny took off his mask and explained, "I have been honest. In this world, I have nothing to worry about, so I don't need to hide my identity." He shrugged self-deprecatingly and said, "Anyway, I've already been exposed by an untrustworthy person. So, it doesn't seem to be a bad idea to trust some people who seem trustworthy, right?" Luke said with interest, "It sounds like you want to cooperate with us. If you're willing to trust me, that is your business." Luke's reaction was very cold. He said in a low voice, "But why should I trust you? You can trust me." Danny said, "I believe you have a way to confirm whether you can trust me to a certain extent. Even if you can't confirm it, the Punisher should be able to." Luke laughed. He raised the phone with his right hand and pointed the camera at Danny. A low voice came from the phone. "Danny Thomas, the new Iron Fist of Kunlun. Although we do not know why this generation of Kunlun chose you, we know you very well. Compared to that mysterious investigator, we trust you more." Danny took a deep breath and said, "I didn't expect that you would target me so soon. If we don't know anything about the new weapon Grandmaster chosen by Kunlun, it would be a dereliction of duty," the voice on the phone said calmly. Danny's eyes darkened. "You know about the divine weapon?" The voice laughed. "You can't be thinking that the divine weapon has entered the Western world. But this place doesn't know anything, right? In fact, the Divine Armament Project was not carried out by the Eastern forces on their own. It was carried out with our approval. The ancient lineage of the East hoped to reforge the divine weapon and control the weapon Grandmaster to obtain the great power of the divine weapon and Devil Blade, to deal with the coming crisis. And we also need the power of the divine weapon to protect Earth. Therefore, after the Chinese government rejected the plan to reforge Shun devices in their territory, it was necessary for Shun devices to flow outside. Danny, you obtained the approval of the Shun device not only because of the decision of the old antiques of Kunlun, but also because of our strength. We were the ones who brought up the conditions for Kunlun to compromise and choose a divine armament grandmaster that belongs to us. That's you, Danny. Therefore, not only do we not know nothing about you, we know a lot about you. Therefore, we are willing to trust you." Danny's gaze changed. "You're not the Punisher, however," the voice said, "but the Punisher trusts me." The phone in Luke's hand suddenly projected a beam of light, creating 3 projections in the air. A black-skinned, bald, one-eyed man looked at Danny with a smile. He smiled and said, "Nice to meet you, Danny, our master of the Shin device." Looking at the projection in front of him, Danny suddenly felt that he seemed to have some impression. Kunlun was not a holy land that knew nothing about the outside world. In fact, before the change, Kunlun was one of the pillars of the God Spear Bureau, an important strategic department in China. They clearly did not lack knowledge about their opponents in the West. After the change, the God Spear Bureau was disbanded. The hidden forces in China, the ancient holy lands, the Buddhist and Taoist sects, the various aristocratic families, the martial arts sects, the active social organizations, and the hidden political forces were all crushed by the iron fist of the dictatorship. The so-called aristocratic families were liquidated, and the new government personally destroyed the rotten parts of the old organizations. Danny had seen with his own eyes that the God Spear Bureau controlled by Kunlun was liquidated by the government. The superhero leaders of Kunlun, codenamed Jade Emperor and Thunder God, and the combat team of the God Spear Bureau, known as the Gods, were completely destroyed by the reorganized armed police force. The members were either retired, killed, or punished. Dan and I knew that the leaders of Kunlun had unfortunately been killed in the end. Jade Emperor was killed by the dimensional soldiers. Before he died, he couldn't hurt the encirclement at all. It could be said that he had no power to fight back. Thunder God was imprisoned in the air prison of the God Spear Bureau, which was now the 3rd special prison in Chaoyang District. Otherwise, the ancient inheritances and old forces in China would not be so obedient. They said that divine weapons could not be forged in China, so they did not dare to forge divine weapons or demonic blades. Even the 3 elders of Kunlun would not be so humble in front of a scenic area administrator. Recently, there was news that the scenic area administrator, Zhao Taizhu, was investigated by the organization for some unspeakable reasons. He was really scared of that bloody liquidation. Danny also knew that a group of energetic social organizations led by Lord Man had been hunted down to the point that Lord Man had to flee with his own body. Countless ancient families and secret forces were like stray dogs. Even though they were only swept by the wind in Kunlun, Danny was still traumatized. At that time, the nominal ruler of Kunlun, Jade Emperor, was found to be interfered with by an extraterrestrial force. He was an extremely powerful expert, 100,000 times stronger than Danny. He was also a powerful force that had been rooted in Kunlun for thousands of years, and was so powerful that it went deep into every corner of Kunlun. In their lair, Kunlun City, they were uprooted by a team of 5-dimensional soldiers from the government in just 1 hour. Jade Emperor himself was hit by a space fission weapon and turned into countless glittering dust in the sky above Kunlun. This scene had appeared repeatedly in Danny's nightmares. Thinking of the scene that left a deep impression on Danny, Danny shivered and suddenly remembered the identity of the person opposite him. "You are Nick Fury, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D. I have seen you in the files of the Divine Spear Bureau." The black one-eyed man suddenly laughed. He laughed happily and looked around before saying to Danny, "Yes, I am Nick. In fact, I am not only talking to you to express my support for you, but also to recruit you. Are you willing to work for me?" "The Avengers?" Danny frowned. The one-eyed man shook his head and said, No. The Avengers are no longer under my leadership. They have their own will and directly belong to the World Security Council. However, after the establishment of the Human Revolutionary Alliance, the World Security Council has actually split. Yes, the Avengers have their own will. They are nominally subordinate to the world and are influenced by the American government. As for me, I am responsible for forming a new superhero organization. The purpose of the establishment of the Avengers is to prepare for revenge against the enemies outside the Earth. It can be said that it is an organization to ensure that we can mutually destroy each other with the aliens. The newly established organization is subordinate to the American government. They have assigned me to form a heroic super team, or mass destruction of humans. In fact, the reason for the establishment of this combat team is that the American government is deeply uneasy about the establishment of the Human Revolutionary Alliance, which is completely beyond their control. They hope to have a super team to deal with the deterrence from the East. Therefore, I have my mission. That is the ultimate team. Danny frowned even more. He said directly, "You know I can't and I don't want to join this kind of minions of the government. Danny, compared to Kunlun, you are already an independent person." The one-eyed man said frankly, "Yes, they want you to join. Of course, it is the goal of those F***king, stupid, rotten, and stinking bureaucrats. They hope to use you to rope in the ancient forces in the East and support the democratic forces in the East. But that is impossible. The thinking of the Cold War is outdated. I have long tried to convince them that the Human Revolutionary Alliance is not an ordinary alliance of countries, nor is it the revival of the past Cold War. It is a brand new political concept, an unprecedented political entity." Chapter 10:17. So, Danny, to tell you the truth, the ultimate team is not for confrontation on Earth, but to unite all forces to fight against the scariest and darkest forces in the universe. It was not born to fight and scheme against each other on Earth, but to protect, or in other words, to protect the survival of all mankind. Danny was silent for a long time, but still refused. But you're not the boss, Nick. I also need to consider the will of Kunlun. They will not allow me to join this Cold War-style confrontation organization. Back to the topic. Why are you concerned about this case? This is not something the director of SHILD needs to be concerned about. The one-eyed man laughed frankly. It is the former director. I have long been removed from SHIELD because I made some serious mistakes. The current director is Carlson. I can give you his contact information. Your investigation can be supported by SHIELD. But you did not answer my question. Danny continued to ask. After listening to his words, Nick was silent for a long time. He considered for a while and then said to Danny, "Turn on Harold's computer." Then the one-eyed man cut off the call with Nick, and a hoarse voice took over the conversation with Danny. "Luke, give him the wireless network card." Luke Cage, who was holding the cell phone, fished out a small thing with a USB port from his jacket pocket. "Who are you?" Danny asked warily. The hoarse voice said, "Haven't you heard of me? You are the Punisher." Danny asked. The voice did not answer, but said to Luke, "Turn on the computer." Luke turned on the computer and plugged the thing into the computer's USB port. At this time, Sky of SHIELD's hands flew over the keyboard. She said to the Punisher, "The technology used in Harold's firewall is very strange. It is a chaotic algorithm, but it is still not a problem for me. I bypassed the sandbox system and have already entered his database. This place has been cleaned. The internal network of Harold Industries was physically isolated. Luke had infiltrated to plug this little thing into the network port of Harold's office. SHIELD's computer team quickly processed the data and extracted the key data. Soon, the Punisher sent a picture to the desktop of Harold's personal computer. Danny sat in front of the computer, listening to the Punisher's explanation as he looked at the picture. It was a picture on yellow parchment that seemed very old. There was a circle drawn on the parchment, with the eccentricity of the circle as the origin. There were many radial lines, and beside the lines were many ancient Latin words. It took Danny a lot of effort to recognize some of them. They seemed to be some ancient names of gods that were difficult to pronounce. On the left side of the parchment, there were some blurred Latin words and some symbols with unknown meanings. The Punisher explained, 3 years ago, Daredevil and I were in the ruins of New York, and we were accidentally involved in a criminal fight. We encountered SHIELD's #1 wanted criminal. This person is so dangerous that I can't even mention his name, so I can only tell you that his code name is Adam. I didn't mean to hide it, but our memories of him began to fade from that day. If our memories became clear, it would be quite dangerous. Many people who came into contact with him, including the strong-willed agents of SHIELD, died one after another in the following days. At that time, we knew how dangerous he was and began to track down those who came into contact with him. The Avengers told us that the existence behind Adam had created a series of terrible creations. The danger of those creations was indescribable. Just coming into contact with their existence, even if it was just a name or a picture, is quite dangerous for those who have come into contact with them. Originally, we thought that those creations appeared and were created after a series of disasters in recent years and after the birth of Adam. But after investigation, we found that they were not created but discovered. Long before the Messiah came to this planet and before humans were born, they existed here on this planet. Like the apocalypse, they were born at the beginning of the universe. We couldn't even tell if an indescribable, terrifying existence had come to the end of time and created them, or if they had extended themselves to the end of time after they were created. Ancient ruins and civilizations recorded their words, and only then did we realize where the problem was. I had come into contact with that indescribable fear, and my body was infected. With the help of the Avengers, I paid a huge price to cure the disease. But there was an even more seriously infected person among the Avengers. His problem was bigger, and we needed him. The whole world needed him. When we were looking for Super Daredevil, we found that he had been appearing and disappearing mysteriously for 3 years, but he had successfully suppressed his infection. At first, we thought that it was because he couldn't see those indescribable horrors, but later research found that it was precisely because he was blind that his senses were sharper than anyone else's. Danny said solemnly. In other words, his infection was even more serious. The Punisher sighed. Originally, we just wanted to find a way to suppress that kind of infection through him. But later, we found that it wasn't that simple. The secret of Super Daredevil might be hiding something more serious. The Punisher said he was looking for someone like Harold. Danny finally couldn't help but stand up. He looked at the parchment map anxiously. What does this have to do with Harold? The Punisher explained Harold's legs were amputated because of a mountaineering accident. Danny was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. Amputation, mountaineering accident. He deserved it. This is God's punishment for him. The Punisher waited for Danny to calm down before continuing. He never gave up on the hope of curing his legs. He invested in Oscorp's regeneration serum, applied for the Avengers' regeneration cradle, and even contacted Stark, hoping to get high-tech prosthetics. Danny sneered. But all of this failed. Yes, the Punisher confirmed. That's why he placed his hopes on some ancient power, an evil power. Since 3 years ago, he seems to have made some progress and started to live in isolation. However, through remote control, he has developed his company even more, and he can even participate in the construction of New York. We believe that he might have gained some knowledge regarding those forbidden powers. Now, the relevant data of Harold's company proves this. This parchment is a remnant of a black magic book from the Middle Ages. The names of the gods on it are all secret names. As for those symbols, it's better if you don't understand them. Harold recently started to destroy some internal information of the company. One of his secret estates, the ancient castle that he lived in for 3 years, accidentally caught fire 2 months ago and was destroyed. There's no doubt that he was cleaning up the traces he left behind. He seemed to have predicted his own death, but Super Daredevil came looking for him and killed him. This seems to be something he didn't expect. Danny's face was gloomy. In other words, he was planning to die. Sometimes, death might not be the end. It might even be the beginning. What else did he leave behind? I don't believe that he could have done all of this alone. Even if he destroyed the traces, there are still people alive. The Punisher sighed and said, the Yamato Society. Harold has worked with many Yakuza groups, and the one with the closest ties should be the Yamato Society. We believe that the Yamato Society might be involved in Harold's plan. Furthermore, there are traces of that evil power among those Japanese. Super Daredevil has always been working to attack the Hand and the Society. So we believe that this organization should know many secrets. Hand and the Society? Danny remembered the name. At this time, Luke suddenly invited, if you want to deal with the Hand and the Society, can you join us? Us? Danny raised his head in confusion. Luke Cage said, yes, us. The Hand and the Society is a cancer. You're not the only one who wants to get rid of them. You can join us. Super Daredevil used to be one of us. I hope you can fill his position. Danny asked, who are you?